Welcome, welcome. You're here at No Harry. Today we present to you, What If Fleur Kissed Harry at platform 9 3/4 and it activated ancient Delacour-Potter Veela bond magic. Like and subscribe if you want more awesome stories. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 1, the train pulled into King's Cross with a sound like the world exhaling. Steam rolled across the platform in great lazy waves, swallowing ankles and trunks and the legs of trolleys being pushed by students who hadn't yet learned to navigate crowds. The Hogwarts Express gave one final, resonant groan as it settled against the buffers, and then the doors were opening and the noise hit like a wall, parents calling names, owls complaining, someone's cat making a sound that no animal should make in public. Harry stepped off last. Not because he was dramatic about it. He just didn't see the point in fighting the crush. He'd done enough fighting for 1 year. His trunk was heavier than it should have been. Hedwig's cage was balanced on top of it, and she was giving him the particular look that meant she'd been cooped up for too long and was holding him personally responsible. He gave her a look back that said, "I know, I'm sorry, just a few more minutes," and she turned her head away with magnificent disdain. The platform was the particular controlled chaos that always accompanied the end of term, except today it had an edge to it. Parents were pulling their children in closer than usual. There were conversations happening in tight clusters, voices low and faces drawn, and Harry recognized the particular quality of that silence, the way people talked when they were frightened but didn't want to be seen being frightened. Voldemort was back. Most of them didn't believe it yet. That was the thing. Dumbledore had announced it, Harry had lived it, but the Ministry had spent the last 2 weeks carefully, systematically dismantling the truth before it could take root. Troubled boy. Delusions. The stress of the tournament. He'd heard the phrases already, from the Hogwarts owls his dorm mates had received, from conversations not quite quiet enough in the corridor. He found he minded less than he expected. What he minded was the weight in his chest that hadn't lifted since the graveyard. The way Cedric's face kept appearing behind his eyes at odd moments, always with that same expression of mild surprise, as if death had been an interruption rather than an ending. He pushed the trolley forward and was immediately nearly knocked sideways by a group of second-years making a break for the barrier, laughing at something, utterly unbothered by the state of the world. Good, he thought. Stay that way as long as you can. He spotted Ron and Hermione a little way down the platform, already surrounded by their families. Mrs. Weasley had her arms around both of them at once, which was an impressive physical achievement given the height difference. Arthur Weasley was shaking hands with someone nearby, that expression on his face he always wore when he was trying to appear calm and failing gently. Hermione's parents were there too, tall, careful people with her same precise quality of attention, looking at the magical world around them with the polite, slightly overwhelmed expression of people who had decided to trust something they didn't entirely understand. Harry watched them for a moment. There was a warmth to it that he didn't want to interrupt. He'd get there. He'd say goodbye properly. But he gave himself 30 seconds of just watching people be happy to see each other, because the Dursleys were somewhere on the other side of that barrier and 30 seconds felt like a reasonable final indulgence. He was so busy watching the Weasleys that he almost missed her. Fleur Delacour was moving through the crowd the way she always moved, with that particular quality of presence that parted people without her having to ask. It wasn't just the Veela heritage, though that was part of it, it was also the way she carried herself, spine straight, chin up, silver blonde hair catching the platform light like it was doing it on purpose. She was with her family. Her mother, Apollon, was unmistakably her origin, the same bone structure, the same silver gilt hair, though there was something warmer and more settled about her, the way a flame becomes an ember without losing its heat. Her father, a trim French man with kind eyes and an expression of permanent gentle bewilderment at the magical world his wife and daughters inhabited, was managing their luggage. And there was the little one, Gabrielle, 8 years old and apparently completely unaware that she had nearly drowned 2 months ago, currently attempting to convince a nearby owl that it was her owl now. Fleur saw him at roughly the same moment he saw her. She changed course. He stopped pushing his trolley because it seemed rude not to. "Harry," she said. She had this way of saying his name that made it sound less like a name and more like a statement of fact she'd arrived at after careful consideration. You are looking, she paused, and the pause was very French, full of assessment, less destroyed than I expected. Thanks, he said. I think it is a compliment. I expected much worse. She stopped in front of him, and up close he could see that she looked tired too, in the way that people who never let themselves look tired still occasionally did. There were faint shadows under her eyes that her composure didn't quite reach. The year was not, it was not what any of us anticipated. No, he agreed. She'd been a champion. He sometimes forgot that, in the narrative of his own survival, because Fleur's tournament had ended in the second task when the Grindylows overwhelmed her. But she'd been there for all of it. The maze. The aftermath. She'd been standing near the edge of the crowd when the cup had taken Harry and Cedric, and she'd been standing there still when only one of them came back. Cedric was, she started, and then stopped. Her jaw tightened slightly. He was a good person. Yeah, Harry said. He was. They stood there for a moment in the middle of the platform noise with that between them, which was the best tribute available and somehow felt adequate because of that. Fleur's little sister appeared at her elbow, looked up at Harry with wide blue eyes, and said something rapid and entirely French. Gabrielle says you are the boy who saved her, Fleur translated, and there was something in her voice that wasn't quite amusement and wasn't quite gratitude but lived somewhere in the neighborhood of both. She has been talking about you since February. It has been, another pause, extensive. Tell her she's very welcome, Harry said, smiling down at Gabrielle, who beamed at him as though he'd said something wonderful. She speaks English, she simply chooses not to in front of strangers, Fleur said. It is a power move. She is 8. Gabrielle, apparently understanding this perfectly, looked entirely unrepentant. Apollon Delacour arrived then, and Harry had the brief sensation of understanding, on a physical level, where Fleur had come from. Apollon was, there was no word for it except luminous, in the specific way that suggested it wasn't metaphorical. She regarded Harry with an expression that was warm and precise at once. Monsieur Potter, she said. Her English was more accented than Fleur's, shaped by different priorities. We owe you a debt that is difficult to name. Please don't, Harry said, slightly desperate. Fleur would have gotten her out, perhaps, Apollon said, in the tone of someone who was being diplomatically kind. But you did. There is a difference. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing, which seemed to satisfy her. There was a brief, charged moment where the Delacour family exchanged a look between them, one of those family conversations conducted entirely in glances. Fleur's father gave a small nod. Apollon's expression shifted into something thoughtful. Gabrielle was still looking at Harry like he was a particularly interesting creature she was considering adopting. Fleur turned back to him. We are going, she said. Back to France. And she stopped again. That jaw-tightening thing. Harry was beginning to understand it as the thing she did when she was reaching for something honest. I did not thank you. Not properly. The second task. You gave me back my sister. Fleur, really, I am going to kiss you on the cheek, she announced, with the energy of someone filing a report, because that is what we do and because you have earned it, and do not make it strange. He laughed despite himself. I won't, she stepped forward, put one hand briefly on his shoulder, and pressed a kiss to his cheek. And the world cracked. That was the only word for it. Not an explosion, nothing that obvious. More like the sound ice makes when the temperature changes, that deep structural crack that comes from somewhere inside the substance itself. Harry felt it in his chest first, a sudden sharp warmth that had nothing to do with embarrassment, followed by something he couldn't name, a recognition, the way you recognize a word in a language you didn't know you spoke. Fleur pulled back. She was staring at him. Her hand was still on his shoulder and she hadn't moved it, and her eyes, they'd changed, just slightly, the blue gone suddenly more luminous, shot through with something gold that flickered and settled and flickered again. "What?" she said. It wasn't a question. It was the word a person uses when questions haven't formed yet. Harry's heart was doing something unusual. Not racing, more like it had shifted into a different rhythm entirely, a deeper one, as if it had been running a little wrong his whole life and something had just corrected it. The warmth in his chest was spreading, following the lines of something he couldn't see, and where it went the world seemed slightly more present, the steam more real, the noise more textured, the cold morning air more specifically itself. "What was?" he started. "Don't move," said a voice. Harry turned. He'd forgotten entirely about Fleur Delacour, which was an oversight, because she was now standing very still 3 feet away with an expression on her face that he'd never seen on an adult before. It wasn't alarm. It was bigger than alarm and older than alarm, and beneath it was something that looked almost like awe. She was staring at her daughter. "Maman," Fleur said, and her voice had changed, still hers, but with something running underneath it, a harmonic that Harry felt in his back teeth. "Tu es ce que s'est passé?" "La liaison," Apollon said. Very quietly. "La liaison de Delacour-Potter." Fleur's hand dropped from Harry's shoulder. She stepped back and he felt the distance like a physical thing, like a cord pulled taut. "That doesn't," Fleur looked at her mother. "That is a story. Grandmere's story." "That is not, Fleur." Apollon's voice was gentle but absolute. "Come here." Gabrielle had gone completely still, which was unnerving in a child who'd been in constant motion 30 seconds ago. She was looking between Harry and Fleur with an expression of solemn, 8-year-old certainty. "Jésus," she said quietly. "You knew nothing," Fleur said, a little desperately. "Jésus," Gabrielle repeated, with the serenity of someone who is used to being right. Harry's hand went to his chest without him deciding to move it. The warmth was still there, not uncomfortable, nothing like pain. It felt more like the difference between a room with no fire and a room with one, except the fire was inside his ribcage and he wasn't burning. He looked at his hand pressing against his sternum and then looked up and found Fleur doing the same thing, both of them standing there in the middle of King's Cross with one hand each pressed to their chests like people checking for a heartbeat they hadn't had before. Their eyes met. Something passed between them that neither of them had vocabulary for yet. Fleur's father, who had apparently been watching all of this from a diplomatic remove, cleared his throat softly and said, in careful English, "I think perhaps we should not do this on a train platform." "Do what?" Harry said. "What just happened?" He was asking this of Apollon, who was the only person present radiating the particular calm of someone who has just had a large, unexpected thing happen and has decided to process it rationally. They had moved, Fleur's father's suggestion having been genuinely wise, to a quieter section of the platform, near the far end where the last carriage rested and the crowds hadn't reached. Someone had conjured a privacy ward, which Harry suspected was Apollon, though he hadn't seen her move. "Before I answer," Apollon said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly, without thinking about what the answer should be." She was looking at him with those precise, warm eyes. "What do you feel right now? Not what you think you should feel. What do you feel?" Harry considered lying. It was a reflex, a Dursley inheritance. Don't admit to anything unusual, don't draw attention, make yourself smaller and quieter and less trouble than you are. He recognized the reflex now, in a way he hadn't always, and he let it pass. "Like something settled," he said. "Like something that was slightly wrong got corrected." He paused. "And I can feel where she is. Without looking. Like knowing where your own hand is in the dark." Fleur made a small sound. He looked at her. She was standing with her arms crossed, not defensively but containingly, as if she needed something to hold on to while she processed. "Yes," she said, shortly. Confirming something. "The Delacour-Potter bond," Apollon said, "is not, as my daughter suggests, merely a story." She chose her words carefully, which Harry noted. She was deciding what to tell him, not withholding, just calibrating. 300 years ago, a Veela, a full Veela, not a descendant as we are, but a true Veela, and a wizard of the Potter line formed a bond. Not a contract. Not a spell. A bond, in the oldest sense. Blood and fire and choice, all three together. What kind of choice? Harry said. The kind that cannot be forced. It requires genuine connection, genuine recognition, though not necessarily understanding. Two people whose natures are compatible in a particular deep way. Apollin's eyes moved between him and Fleur. The Veela fire in our bloodline has been seeking its match for 3 generations. It has, apparently, been patient. I kissed his cheek, Fleur said, with considerable heat. It was a gratitude gesture, ma chérie. I was not proposing anything, Fleur. Apollin's voice was a quiet blade. Not harsh. Just exact. I know. The bond does not care about your intentions. You know this. You were always told, I was told it was a story. I told you the incomplete version because you were young and I did not think, Apollin paused. Something crossed her face that might have been guilt. I did not think he existed. He, Fleur said flatly. The match. Apollin looked at Harry again. She would have known it the first moment she touched you. Did you not feel it, when you pulled her sister from the lake? Harry thought about it. He'd been somewhat occupied with not drowning and with the general horror of finding what looked like a dead 11-year-old in the dark water, so his emotional catalogue from that moment was not detailed. But there had been something, he realized, a pull, a current that wasn't water, when Fleur had emerged from the lake and run toward Gabrielle and their arms had caught. He'd felt it peripherally, standing to one side, cold and dripping. He hadn't known what it was. So he'd filed it under strange things that happened to me and moved on. A little, he said. Fleur was looking at him. He couldn't fully read her expression, it was doing several things at once, which seemed characteristic. What does it do? He asked. The bond. What does it change? Apollin considered the question with appropriate seriousness. It amplifies. Both of you. The Veela heritage Fleur carries, it will strengthen. Her fire, her perception, her particular gifts. The word was chosen carefully. And you. The Potter line carries something, Harry. Something that has been dormant, suppressed, or perhaps simply unawakened. The bond will wake it. What something? She smiled, and there was something in it that was part warmth and part apology. That is not mine to tell you. It is yours to discover. He opened his mouth. And before you ask, she continued, no, you cannot undo it. No, it will not harm you. And yes, your life has just become considerably more complicated. She glanced toward the barrier, where the non-magical world waited on the other side. Where are you spending the summer? The question landed like a stone in still water. Harry said, my aunt and uncles. The silence that followed was delicate. I see, Apollin said. It's protective. Apparently. He didn't put much feeling into the word apparently. He didn't need to. Apollin and her husband exchanged a look. It was a fast, complex conversation in 2 seconds, the kind long marriages produce. You should come to France, Apollin said. Maman, Fleur said. The bond will, Apollin gestured, a very French gesture that meant the situation requires it. Distance will be uncomfortable. Not dangerous, not at this stage, but unpleasant in the way an untended fire is unpleasant. And there is much that needs to be explained. She paused. And understood. I can't just, Harry started. Can you not? Her gaze was mild. Is there something preventing you? He thought about the Dursleys. He thought about the ministry. He thought about Dumbledore's careful letters about blood protection and staying at Privet Drive. He thought about the graveyard and Cedric and the voice in his chest that had been telling him all year, in a register too low to hear properly, that something was wrong with the shape of his life. He thought about the warmth in his chest that was still there, steady and real, and how it was the most grounded he'd felt since, possibly ever. "No," he said. "I suppose not." Ron and Hermione found him 20 minutes later. He'd gone back to his trolley. The conversation with the Delacours had been tucked into a quiet corner of the platform that time seemed to have passed around, and was standing by Hedwig's cage in a state of barely organized thought. "You look strange," Ron said, by way of greeting. "Stranger than usual." "Thanks, Ron. Are you all right?" Hermione had her reading people face on, which was only slightly less intimidating than her reading book's face. "Something happened," Harry said. He told them. He kept it condensed, the kiss, the crack, the warmth, Apollin's explanation. Ron's face went through several stages of expression that were impossible to catalogue. Hermione's went very still, which meant she was processing rapidly. "A Veela bond," she said, when he finished. "Apparently." "Harry, those are, I read about those." Of course she had. "They're mentioned in ancient and elemental blood magic, which is a restricted section text, but Madame Pants let me borrow it in third year when I was researching. The point is they're considered theoretical by most modern scholars. There are records from the 15th and 16th centuries but, it didn't feel theoretical," Harry said. "No," she said quietly. "I don't suppose it did." She was quiet a moment. How do you feel about it?" "About her?" It was a good question. Hermione asked the good questions, when she remembered to ask them. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "I barely know her. But he touched his chest briefly, "whatever this is, it's not frightening. It should be, probably. Everything strange that happens to me is usually frightening. But this isn't." "Right," said Ron. He sounded like a person who was filing several things away to process later. "Right. So you're going to France?" "Think so." "To a French chateau," Ron continued. "Apparently. With Fleur Delacour." He paused. "Her actual family. For the summer." "Ron, no, he laughed, a sudden bright sound that cut through the platform noise. "Mate, your life is so weird." Which was, Harry thought, accurate. The Dursleys were waiting near the barrier, Aunt Petunia thin and tight-lipped, Uncle Vernon red and already suppressing something, Dudley standing a little apart from them with the specific posture of a boy who had recently had the sense frightened into him by a group of dementors and hadn't quite returned to his former confidence. Harry met them before they could move. "I'm not coming home," he said. Uncle Vernon's face began its familiar ascent toward purple. I'm going to France for the summer." "With a family." "A wizarding family." He kept his voice even. "Not aggressive. Just a statement of fact. I'll send a letter through the post to let you know I'm fine, once a week, so Dumbledore won't worry." "Now you listen here," Vernon started. "You'll have the house to yourselves." Harry looked at him steadily. "No owls coming in. No strange post. No magic of any kind. Isn't that what you want?" The war happening on Vernon's face between outrage and desire was brief. Desire won. "There'll be conditions," Vernon said, trying to salvage authority from a position where he had none. "There always are," Harry said. "But they're not yours to set anymore." He turned away. Behind him, he heard Vernon make a sound that was half word and half outrage, and Aunt Petunia shushing him, and Dudley saying nothing at all. He went back to the Delacours. Apollon handled the practical matters with the brisk precision of someone who dealt with practical matters as a matter of course. There was a brief exchange between her and a tall, silver-haired woman who Harry hadn't noticed before, standing slightly to one side of the family group, dressed in clothes that were French and old and clearly expensive in the way that didn't advertise itself. She had Apollon's bone structure aged into something knife-sharp, and eyes the color of winter sky, and she hadn't taken them off Harry since his return. "My mother," Apollon said, briefly. Celeste. Celeste Delacour looked at him for a long moment. La liaison, she said, echoing her daughter's earlier words. But in her voice it was different, no surprise. Certainty. The way someone says of course when the world finally confirms something they've known for years. She reached out and put one hand, small, steady, ringed with old gold, against Harry's forehead. Not a blessing. Something more deliberate. He felt it, a cool assessment, like being read. "We," she said, and pulled her hand back. "He will do." "Grandmere," Fleur said. "He will do very well," Celeste amended, and this was apparently concession. Fleur's father, whose name, Harry had now learned, was Paul, and who seemed to navigate the extraordinary gravity of his wife and daughter and mother-in-law with the cheerful equanimity of someone who had long ago made peace with the universe, clapped Harry briefly on the shoulder. "We are glad you are coming," he said. "The summer is long and Fleur has had a difficult year. It will be good for her to have," he searched briefly, "a peer." "Paul," Apollon said. "A peer," he repeated firmly. "I am being precise." Gabrielle was standing next to Harry now, apparently having decided that proximity was acceptable, and slid her hand into his in the way small children do when they have decided something. He looked down at her. She looked up. "Too es brave," she said. "She says you are brave," Fleur translated. "I heard," Harry said. He looked back down at Gabrielle. "Merci." Gabrielle's smile was the uncomplicated kind that 8-year-olds who trust completely produce, and it hit him somewhere unguarded. The portkey Apollon produced was a battered old coin, French, copper, bearing the face of a republic that no longer existed, and she held it flat in her palm. "You have done side-along before?" she asked. "Once," Harry said. "Didn't love it." "No one does," she agreed. "Hold Gabrielle's hand." "She has a tendency to. I do not spin," Gabrielle said, with deep indignation. "She spins," Fleur said. "I do not," the coin glowed blue-white. The platform lurched, pulled, disappeared, and then there was the long-falling shriek of portkey travel, worse than apparition, more violent, the kind of transit that feels like the universe briefly forgetting where you are, and then grass underfoot, warm air that was nothing like London, the smell of lavender and warm stone and something faintly electric that Harry would later come to recognize as the estate's ambient magic. He stumbled. Gabrielle, who absolutely spun, crashed gently into his side. He caught her by reflex. Fleur landed perfectly, because of course she did. When Harry straightened up and looked around, he stopped. The house, chateau was the right word, though house kept trying to claim it, sat on a rise above a valley going gold in the late afternoon light. It was old stone and large windows and a garden that was either very well tended or operating on its own terms, probably both. There were lavender borders and roses doing as they pleased and what looked like an orchard in organized chaos to the left. A small stream caught the light somewhere below the rise. It was, in every way that mattered, the opposite of Privet Drive. He felt the warmth in his chest settle deeper, as if it too had arrived somewhere it recognized. Fleur was watching him from a few feet away. He hadn't heard her cross the distance between them, which was strange because she wasn't a quiet person, exactly, she was more someone who moved with deliberate economy, but she was there, and she was watching him look at her home. "Well," she said. "It's beautiful," he said. Simply, because it was. She looked at it herself for a moment, as people look at things they know well but are seeing through new eyes. "Yes," she said. "It is." She paused. "Come. I will show you where you are staying." And then, another pause, and the jaw thing, and then something that was almost but not quite reluctant, almost but not quite a smile, "Then we should probably talk." "Probably," he agreed. She turned and walked toward the chateau. He fell into step beside her, half a pace back, and then caught up, because there was no reason not to, and they walked together through the lavender and the late light, and behind them Gabrielle was definitely spinning again, and Paul Delacour was laughing, and Celeste was watching Harry's back with those winter sky eyes, and Apollon was standing very still in the middle of the garden looking at nothing in particular and thinking, very fast, about history. About bonds. About what happens when things that have been waiting long enough finally arrive. The light was honey gold and warm. The lavender smelled like something from a world where things went right. Harry Potter walked through a garden in the south of France and felt, for the first time in recent memory, the extraordinary and bewildering sensation of being exactly where he was supposed to be. The warmth in his chest agreed. Ch1 Chapter 2, What Blood Remembers. The room they gave him was on the second floor, east-facing, with shutters that opened onto a view of the valley. The bed had a wrought iron frame and a mattress that was approximately 4 times better than anything he'd ever slept on, and the ceiling had the particular quality of old plasterwork, slight imperfections that caught the light at different hours and made patterns you didn't notice until you'd been staring at them a while. Harry stood in the middle of it after Fleur closed the door and just breathed. Hedwig had been given a large perch near the window, open to the evening air, and had immediately flown out into the French countryside with the focused enthusiasm of someone who had grievances to work out. The trunk sat at the foot of the bed. His trainers were still on. He hadn't moved past standing because standing was enough for the moment. The room smelled like old stone and lavender and something faintly sweet from the orchard. He sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress received him without complaint. He put his face in his hands for about 30 seconds, not crying, not panicking, just having a moment where the day was acknowledged in its full scope, and then lifted his head, looked at the window, and watched the valley go amber and then rose and then the particular dark blue that happens in the south right before the stars decide to show up. He fell asleep in his clothes, which was fine. He woke to birdsong and the smell of coffee so good it felt almost aggressive. Sunlight was hitting the wall at a low angle, meaning early morning, and the shutters had blown open in the night and there was a breeze that had the quality of something that had crossed a lot of warm space to get here. He lay there for a moment, aware that he felt, genuinely rested, which was not an ordinary event, and that the warmth in his chest was still present, steady as a banked coal, which was also not ordinary but was beginning to feel like something his body was simply incorporating. He could feel, distantly, that Fleur was somewhere below him and to the left. Not a specific location, more a directional certainty, the way you know where the sun is even behind cloud cover. She was awake. The quality of her presence felt alert, slightly guarded, thinking hard. He got up, found a bathroom that had clearly been made accessible to guests with the brisk efficiency of a family that was used to guests, and came downstairs 15 minutes later following his nose. The kitchen was large and old and full of mourning. Copper pots hung from a rack over a central island. There were herbs in terracotta pots along the windowsill. A coffee press sat on the counter next to a breadboard that currently hosted half a loaf of something that looked dense and dark and good. There was a bowl of apricots. Paul Delacour was at the table reading a French newspaper with the morning contentment of a man who had decided the world was, fundamentally, all right. He looked up when Harry appeared in the doorway. "Coffee?" he said. "Please," Harry said. It was better than anything Hogwarts had ever produced, which was saying something. Harry sat at the table and wrapped both hands around the cup, and Paul went back to his newspaper with the easy grace of someone who understood that the best hospitality was sometimes just sharing space quietly. Harry ate an apricot. Then another. They tasted like something that had actually grown in actual sunlight rather than being manufactured in a warehouse somewhere. "She is in the garden," Paul said, without looking up. "My wife. She thought you might want to," he gestured vaguely, which communicated that Apollon had thought she wanted to share and was waiting for Harry to be ready. "Now," Harry said. Paul looked up. He considered Harry with those kind, tired eyes. She is very thorough," he said. "When she has decided something is important, she is thorough." He turned a page. "But she is not unkind." "I know," Harry said. Paul looked at him again. This time there was something in it, assessment, but the non-threatening kind, the kind a person does when they're trying to understand something about the world through the evidence in front of them. You saved Gabrielle, he said. Yes. And now, he set the paper down, and for a moment the cheerful equanimity dropped and what was underneath was just a father, with everything that meant. I want to be clear about something, Harry. Before my wife explains everything, before my mother-in-law decides things, before Fleur makes up her mind about what she thinks, I want to be clear. His English was careful, precise. My daughter is not a prize. She is not a reward. She is, he stopped. She is extraordinary and she has spent her whole life being seen for the wrong things. I need you to understand that before any bond or any magic says anything else. Harry looked at him. I know, he said. I mean, I don't know her, not really. But I know that. I knew it watching her in the tournament. He thought about the way Fleur had handled herself all year, the precise wand work, the determination, the way she talked to people like she expected them to have sense and was only mildly disappointed when they didn't. She was the best of the champions, tactically. Just, had bad luck in the second task. Paul stared at him. What? Harry said. You are the first person to say that, Paul said. Who is not family? Harry thought about that. He thought about how Fleur had been described at school, by the boys who watched her with that glazed attention and the girls who dismissed her with competitive sharpness, and by pretty much nobody as the best technical champion running. That's stupid, he said. Paul smiled. It changed his whole face. Yes, he said. It is. He picked up his paper again. Go. She is in the garden. Take your coffee. The garden in the morning was different from the garden at evening, less golden, sharper, the colors more themselves, the lavender a serious purple rather than a romantic haze. Apollon was sitting at an iron table near the rose border with her own coffee and a leather-bound book that was either very old or extremely well-maintained. She looked up as Harry crossed the lawn. Sit, she said, gesturing. He sat. For a moment she just looked at him the way she had at the station, warm, precise, reading something, and he let her, because he got the sense that trying to manage Apollon Delacour's observations was an exercise in futility. How did you sleep? She asked. Better than I have in months. That will continue, she said. The bond settles the nervous system. It's one of its kinder effects. You know a lot about it, Harry said. I have spent 20 years studying it, she said simply. Since I first came across the reference in my grandmother's journals and realized it was not the family myth we had been told it was. She paused. My grandmother Celeste found the original record in the Delacour family archive when she was a young woman. A letter, 3 centuries old, from the witch who first formed the bond. Her name was Sylvian Delacour, and the wizard was Aldrich Potter. Harry kept his expression neutral, though something in his chest gave a particular pulse. Aldrich Potter, he said. A remarkable man, by the account. She traced the edge of her coffee cup. He was, according to the letter, not from a prominent family. Not wealthy, not politically connected. What he was, Sylvian wrote, was present. She meant it in a specific way. She meant that he was entirely himself, entirely in the moment, without the armor that most people wear. She looked at Harry steadily. She said the Veela fire in her recognized him immediately. As its equal. Harry sat with that for a moment. And what happened to them? He asked. They were extraordinary, Apollon said. Together, their magic was, the records used the word catastrophic, which in the context is a compliment. They were bonded for 40 years. They had 4 children. One line continued as Potter, one as Delacour. The bond passed dormant through both lines, waiting. She paused. There was a condition. The original letter specified it, the bond would only activate if the descendants were, as Sylvian wrote, worthy of each other. Not powerful enough. Worthy. What does worthy mean? I've thought about that for 20 years, Apollon said. I believe it means, genuine. That both parties have to be genuinely themselves, in the moment of contact. No pretension, no performance. Real. Harry thought about the platform. He thought about the way he and Fleur had been standing there talking about Cedric with no particular agenda, no management of impressions, just two tired people who'd been through something acknowledging it. Okay, he said quietly. The effects of the bond are progressive, Apollon continued. They develop over weeks and months rather than arriving all at once. What you felt yesterday was the activation, the initial recognition. What comes next is, she chose her word with care, amplification. Your husband said that word. You both did. Because it is the right word. The bond doesn't give you things you don't have. It finds what is already present and makes it more available. She looked at him directly. Harry, I want to ask you something. And I need you to be honest in a way that may be uncomfortable. He nodded. Have you ever felt that your magic was being held back? Not by skill or training, but by something else. Something external. The question sat in the morning air. He should have felt defensive. Instead, he felt the way you feel when someone names a thing you've been half aware of for years, a complicated relief, the kind that comes with edges. Yes, he said. Since I was 11. Since, he stopped. There are moments where I do something and I don't know where it comes from. Something larger than what I normally have access to. And then it's gone and I can't get back to it. Apollon nodded slowly. That is consistent with suppression. Who would suppress? No one may have done it deliberately, she said. These things happen through circumstance, through the accumulation of choices others make about what to let a child know about himself. She wasn't making an accusation. She was being precise. Your magical education began later than it should have. Your early childhood was spent in an environment hostile to magic. Blood wards of the kind used for your protection can, incorrectly calibrated, create a ceiling. She paused. The bond will dissolve those ceilings. Harry was quiet for a moment. All of them, he said. All of them, she confirmed. There was a beat of silence in which a bee moved through the lavender and a distant bird made a particular argument with another distant bird, and the morning continued being entirely unconcerned with the scope of what was being discussed. Right, Harry said. You are taking this very calmly, Apollon observed. I'm not calm, he said. I've had a lot of large things happen to me in a row and I've found that if I panic immediately I miss things. He looked at her. What does Fleur think about all of this? A slight, complicated smile. Ask her. He found her in the orchard. She was sitting in the fork of an apple tree, not perched carefully, actually in the fork, knees up, back against the trunk, eating an apple and staring at nothing with the focused blankness of someone doing heavy thinking. She was in muggle clothes, jeans and a light shirt, and her hair was loose, which was the first time he'd seen it that way. At school it had always been arranged, at the station it had been arranged. Loose it was very long and fell in silver gold waves and was doing what it liked in the light breeze. She heard him coming. He wasn't trying to be quiet. She told you, Fleur said. Most of it, I think. He stopped at the base of the tree, looking up at her. How long have you been up here? Since 5. She took a bite of apple. Chewed. I think better in trees. I didn't know that. There is a lot you don't know about me. It wasn't hostile. It was just a fact she was reminding herself of as much as him. And I don't know much about you. And yet, she gestured vaguely with the apple, apparently we are bound. The word landed with weight. Ancient family magic that two dead people we share an ancestor with set up 300 years ago has decided that now is the time. Is that how you feel about it? Harry said. Like it was decided for you? She looked at him sharply. He met it. Because I thought about that, he continued. On the train, before we arrived. It's the first thing I thought about, actually. Whether I should be angry about it. Whether this was another thing happening to me. He leaned against the tree trunk, looking up at the gaps in the leaves where the sky showed through. But your mum said the condition is genuineness. It only activated because we were real in that moment. Which means it didn't choose for us. It confirmed something that was already there. She was quiet. That's very philosophical for 7 in the morning, she said finally. I had a head start. Your mum talks early. A short silence. Then Fleur did something that surprised him. She laughed, a quick, genuine sound, more surprised than amused. Like she hadn't expected to. Yes, she said. She does. She dropped from the tree in one clean movement, landing lightly in the long grass. Up close, without the tournament context, without the platform and the crowd, he became aware of something he hadn't quite had time to register before, that Fleur was watching him differently than she'd watched him at school. At school, her gaze had been the polite assessment of a champion tolerating a fellow competitor. Now it was something else, something that was trying to figure out what it was looking at. He felt something similar looking at her. I don't want you to think I am unhappy that it is you, she said, and this clearly cost her something. That came out wrong. What I mean is, I spent a year at Hogwarts feeling like the walls were closing in. Like I was being managed. Like everyone had decided what I was and was just, waiting for me to perform it. She crossed her arms. Not defensively, the containing gesture again. The bond was a shock. But the fact that it chose someone who has never once treated me like decoration, that is not, she stopped. I am not unhappy, she repeated, simpler this time. Neither am I, Harry said. The warmth in his chest pulsed. He didn't mention it but he watched her eyes flicker, and knew she'd felt it too. We should probably practice, she said, briskly, shifting tone the way you shift a car into gear. The amplification your mother is talking about. If my magic is going to change, I want to know what it does before it does something embarrassing in public. Sensible, he said. I am always sensible, she said, and turned toward the house. Come. We will eat breakfast and then we will find somewhere to practice where we cannot accidentally set anything important on fire. Have you set things on fire before? The Veela fire is not metaphorical, Harry. Right. I burned down half a practice courtyard at Beauxbatons when I was 13 and in the middle of an argument with someone who deserved it. She said this without apparent regret. My directress was less understanding than she should have been, given that he absolutely deserved it. Harry fell into step beside her as they crossed the orchard back toward the house. What did he do? He asked. He told me that the only reason I'd placed in the practical exams was because the examiner was a man. Ah. I got detention for a month. She paused. I also got an O in the practical exam, which I chose to focus on. Harry smiled. Good priority. I thought so. After breakfast, which involved Gabrielle explaining at considerable length that she was teaching herself English and demonstrating this by narrating her own actions like a sports commentator, which Fleur bore with the patience of someone who had been doing this for 2 years, they went to what Apollon called the practice ground. It was a field behind the orchard, flat and wide, bounded by a stone wall on 3 sides and a hedgerow on the 4th. The grass was long and there were old scorch marks on the stone wall that spoke to a history of family use. Celeste was already there. Harry hadn't expected this. She was standing in the middle of the field in the same way she'd been standing on the platform, slightly apart from everything, entirely contained within herself, those winter sky eyes moving from him to Fleur to him again. Grandmere is not here to watch, Fleur said, with the assurance of someone who knew their grandmother very well. She is here to direct. Correct, Celeste said. Her English was precise in a way that suggested it was a second or third language that had been defeated through sheer force of will. Sit. They sat. Harry on the wall, Fleur on the grass. Celeste walked around them once, slowly, and it was a very specific feeling, being evaluated by someone who had the knowledge and the authority and none of the interest in performing either. The bond is 3 days old, she said. It is, at present, she searched for the word, a seed. It will grow. The direction it grows depends on what you do now. She looked at Harry. You. What can you do? Aside from standard Hogwarts curriculum? Harry said. Yes. He thought about it honestly. I can produce a corporeal Patronus. I could do it at 13. I can cast nonverbal spells under pressure, though not consistently in normal practice. I'm better at combat magic than most things. And there are moments where I do things I can't fully explain, large things, that I can't reproduce on demand. Celeste nodded as if he was confirming something. The suppression your mother described, she said to Fleur, who had clearly already been briefed. Yes, Fleur said. Show me, Celeste said to Harry. Produce the Patronus. He pulled his wand. Thought of the moment this morning, the apricot, the birdsong, Gabrielle narrating herself at breakfast. The warmth in his chest. He pushed that into the spell. Expecto Patronum. Prongs materialized, but differently. He'd cast the spell hundreds of times and he knew his Patronus as a creature of silver light, solid and defined. This was that, but larger. Not just in physical scale but in the quality of the light, which was brighter and had a kind of depth to it, as if the silver had layers. The stag moved through the morning air and Celeste watched it with the expression of a scientist observing a result she'd predicted. More, she said. Push more. Harry had never been told to push more. The standard instruction was control, containment, precision. He looked at the stag and thought about what more meant and then stopped thinking about what it meant and just gave it more, let something open that usually had a lid on it. The stag doubled. Not 2 stags, 1 stag, but the light became so intense it cast shadows in the morning sun, silver shadows, which was physically impossible and was happening anyway. The grass around it bent gently as if in a wind from the light itself. Bien, Celeste said. Harry brought it back down, let it dissolve. His arm wasn't tired. That was new. Now you, Celeste said to Fleur. Fleur stood. She didn't draw her wand. She held out one hand, palm up, and Harry watched, very carefully, as a flame appeared above it. Not a spell, no incantation. Just fire, responding to a request rather than a command. It was extraordinary. Most spellfire was a specific color, a specific temperature. This was, it changed, cycling through golds and whites and one particular shade that was nearly silver, and it threw no heat at all from a distance though he could see it was real fire from the way it moved. Since the bond activated, Fleur said, as the flame grew, it is, louder. More present. The flame moved up her arm without burning. At Beau's batons I had good control. This is, she closed her hand and the fire disappeared cleanly, more than good control will be able to handle, for a while. Together, Celeste said. They looked at her. You heard me. Stand together. Close. They moved, slightly awkwardly in the way of 2 people who do not yet have a physical vocabulary with each other, until they were standing side by side, shoulders nearly touching. Now, Celeste said. Both. At once. Whatever you want. Do not think about it. Harry raised his wand. Fleur raised hers. He thought about the warmth in his chest and reached toward it, and he felt, and this was the strangest thing, like hearing harmony when you'd only ever heard melody, he felt Fleur reach back from her side. They cast simultaneously, no planned spell, no agreed target. The stone wall at the far end of the field exploded. Not crumbled. Exploded. Chunks of 300-year-old limestone in all directions, a hole 3 meters across, clean edges, a faint silver-gold residue on the broken stone that lingered like a signature. They both stared at it. Bien, Celeste said again, completely unsurprised. We just destroyed the wall, Fleur said. It needed replacing, Celeste said, without turning around. It was structurally unsound. Now your father has an excuse. Fleur looked at Harry. He looked back. The warmth in his chest was roaring, and he could see in her eyes that hers was doing the same, that golden flicker behind the blue. We should practice more, Harry said. Obviously, she said, and there was something in her voice, barely there, beginning of something, the warmest she'd sounded since he arrived. They practiced for 3 hours. Celeste directed with the efficiency of someone who had been thinking about this for a long time and had a curriculum already prepared. She pushed Harry into corners he hadn't been in before, not against opponents, against himself, against the specific shape of his own power, learning its edges. She pushed Fleur into a precision that her raw increase in power was threatening to overwhelm. By the end of the 3rd hour, Harry had destroyed 2 more sections of wall, repaired one of them using a construction spell he'd never attempted that worked on the first try, produced a Patronus simultaneously with Fleur's fire that merged into something neither silver nor gold but both, and discovered that when he was pushed past his usual ceiling he stopped feeling tired and started feeling, instead, like something in him was waking up. Not a metaphor. An actual, physical sensation of something unfurling. Enough, Celeste said. It was nearly noon and the sun was high and fierce. You will rest. Eat. Do not practice alone today. Why not? Harry asked. Celeste looked at him with those eyes. Because you do not yet know the full shape of what you have, she said, and I am not having you accidentally level my daughter's house. Fair, Harry said. They walked back through the orchard together, Harry and Fleur, not talking for a while. Comfortable silence, which was its own kind of remarkable, the ease of it, given that 3 days ago they were polite acquaintances at best. Your grandmother, Harry said eventually. She knew. On the platform. The moment she looked at me, she already knew. She has known her whole life, Fleur said, stepping over a root. She found my great-great-grandmother's journal when she was young. The one who first documented the bond. She has been, a pause, waiting. She told my mother when she was a girl. My mother has been waiting since. I was told a story. She glanced at him sideways. I was told a story because I was young and the story was, she searched, potentially inconvenient. Potentially inconvenient, Harry repeated. A girl who grows up knowing she has a destined, she made a face at the word even before it arrived, someone, who grows up waiting, who allows that to shape her, that is not the kind of woman she wanted me to be. Fleur looked ahead. My mother is very clever. Yeah, Harry said. She is. Another comfortable silence. I placed second at Beau's batons in every subject except practical charms, Fleur said, from what seemed like nowhere. I placed first in that. I am a qualified junior cursebreaker. I was offered an apprenticeship at the French Ministry of Magic that I turned down because it was offered partly because of how I look and I found that, the jaw thing, unacceptable. Harry thought about why she was telling him this. Not self-aggrandizement. Something else. The thing her father had wanted him to understand, delivered in her own way. You're telling me who you are, he said. She glanced at him. The glance lasted a moment longer than a glance usually does. Yes, she said. Okay. He thought about it, about what was fair in return. I'm bad at potions and always have been, mostly because the person teaching it has wanted me to fail since I was 11 and that does things to your confidence. I'm good at defense and flying. I'm a decent tactician in the moment and a terrible strategist in advance. I don't plan, I react, and that's both a strength and a problem. He paused. I grew up without magic, in a house that thought I was a freak, and I've spent 5 years at a school where every year someone tries to kill me, and so my baseline for what constitutes a difficult situation is probably calibrated wrong. She was quiet for a moment. Who has tried to kill you? She said. I know last year. But, every year? Yeah. Mon Dieu. It's fine, he said, and heard immediately how that sounded. It is very much not fine, she said, and the way she said it was not soft and pitying, it was sharp and clear and factual, the way she'd say a potion ingredient was wrongly measured. That should not be normal, Harry. I know, he said. And he did know. He was just only recently learning to feel it. I know. They walked out of the orchard shadow and back into the sunlight, and the house was ahead of them, solid and old and warm in the noon heat, and somewhere inside Gabrielle was almost certainly narrating something, and Paul Delacour was almost certainly in his study being contented, and Apollon was almost certainly thinking hard about something she hadn't told anyone yet. Fleur stopped walking. Harry stopped too. She was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen from her before, not the assessment, not the sharp wit, not the contained energy. Something more direct. Something that had decided to stop being complicated about itself. I am glad it is you, she said. Simply. Without the effort it had cost her to say the version of it this morning. I wanted to say that more clearly than I managed before. The warmth in his chest did something entirely unhelpful to his ability to respond with any kind of cool. I'm glad it's you too, he said. Which was entirely true and entirely insufficient but was all the words he had. She nodded once, in the manner of something settled, and turned back toward the house. Come, she said. You need to eat. You used a lot of magic this morning and you are too thin, which I noticed on the platform and which we are going to address. You noticed I was too thin on the platform? I am observant, she said. It is a Veela trait. Also a Delacour trait. Also simply a me trait. She held the kitchen door open. Come in. He came in. Gabrielle was at the kitchen table, narrating herself making a sandwich, her new English fully deployed. She looked up when Harry sat down. You blow up the wall, she said. Statement, not question. Part of it, Harry said. Gabrielle nodded sagely. Grandmere fix it, she said, and took a bite of sandwich. Probably, Harry agreed. Outside the kitchen window, the summer was doing everything the south of France could do with a July afternoon. The lavender was loud with bees. The valley below was gold. Somewhere in the orchard a bird was engaged in the same argument as this morning, which suggested it was either a very committed bird or the argument had merit. Harry ate lunch in a French kitchen with a family that wasn't his, and the warmth in his chest was steady and present and real, and upstairs in the east-facing room the trunk was open and Hedwig's perch was empty because she was somewhere happy in the French sky, and for the first time in recent memory the future didn't feel like a thing he was just surviving toward. It felt like something. Not defined yet. Not fully understood. But something. That was enough to be going on with. Chapter 3, What the Vault Remembers. The owl arrived on a Thursday. Harry had been at the Chateau Delacour for 9 days, and those 9 days had established a rhythm that felt both new and inevitable, the way a good habit does when you finally form one. Mornings were for practice with Celeste. Afternoons were loose, sometimes more practice, sometimes reading in the orchard, sometimes helping Paul in the garden, which involved mostly Paul explaining in careful English what needed doing while Harry did it wrong and Paul corrected him with the patience of a man who found gentle correction one of life's quiet pleasures. Evenings were for the family, dinner around the long table in the stone-floored dining room, conversation in 2 languages that had started as polite and had become real. He was changing. He could feel it in the way you feel a bruise healing, not dramatically, not all at once, but the soreness less each day, the mobility returning. He was also sleeping. Properly, deeply, the kind of sleep that actually does something for you. No nightmares, or rather, the nightmares still came occasionally, the graveyard, Cedric, Voldemort's voice, but they arrived differently now. Like they were happening behind glass instead of inside his skull. He'd mentioned this to Apollon and she'd said the bond regulated the nervous system, which he already knew, but what she added was that it also meant he was, for perhaps the first time in his life, not alone in the most fundamental sense, that some part of his mind knew this and was relaxing accordingly. He wasn't sure how he felt about being told his brain was relaxing. But the sleep was good so he accepted it. Fleur was, Fleur. She defied easy summary. She was sharp and funny and occasionally withering in ways that were never unkind, and she was teaching him curse-breaking theory in the afternoons because she said anyone doing the kind of combat magic he did without understanding curse architecture was asking for reflective damage, and she was right about that. She explained things the way she did everything, directly, with the assumption that he was intelligent enough to follow. He found this bracing and appreciated it enormously. The bond was growing. That was the only way to describe it. The warmth had become more specific, more detailed. He could feel the general shape of her emotional state across a room, not read her mind, nothing that precise, just sense whether she was focused or irritated or quietly amused. She could do the same with him, which had led to several conversations that started with "you are frustrated about something" and ended with Harry saying something he'd been carrying for days and feeling better for having said it. He was also doing things with his magic that he couldn't have done 2 weeks ago. The ceilings Apollon had described were gone, or not gone, but pushed back, the walls of a room made larger, more space to move in. He'd repaired the sections of wall he and Fleur had destroyed, not with effort but with precision, feeling the structure of the stone the way a surgeon feels tissue. He'd cast a full-scale weather ward over the practice ground when a thunderstorm threatened, a spell that was 7th-year curriculum at minimum, and done it in the time it takes to breathe out. Celeste had watched this and said, "Bien," and then immediately pushed him harder. He was beginning to understand that bien from Celeste meant something was going exactly as she'd always known it would. So the morning of the owl was a Thursday, 9 days in, and Harry was in the practice ground doing focused wandless work, something Celeste had introduced 4 days ago with the caveat that most wizards cannot do this, but you are not most wizards, so try. When the barn owl came in low and purposeful across the field and landed on his outstretched arm with the professionalism of a courier who was being paid by the delivery. The letter was rolled in a scroll sealed with wax the color of gold. The seal was an image he'd never seen, a pair of scales, but one side held a sword and the other held a key, and beneath them was a motto in Latin he couldn't read. Fleur appeared at his shoulder. She'd been practicing her own focused work 30 feet away and had come across when the owl landed, because that was simply what happened now. Anything unusual drew them together with the natural gravity of two things that have accepted they're in each other's orbit. She read the seal and made a sound. "What?" Harry said. "That is Gringotts." She was looking at it with her head tilted. "But not the standard seal. That is the Master Vault seal. The Senior Goblin seal." "I don't have a Master Vault," Harry said. She looked at him. He looked at her. He broke the seal. The letter was 4 lines long. "Mr. H. J. Potter, we require your presence at Gringotts, London at your earliest convenience regarding Vault 7, which has been sealed under the authority of the Delacour-Potter Estate Trust since the year 1693. Recent events have triggered a condition of the trust that requires the presence of the direct heir. This matter is of significant and time-sensitive importance. Ragnarok, Director of Accounts, Gringotts Wizarding Bank." Harry read it twice. He looked at Fleur. "Vault 7, she said carefully. "That is not a small number." "No," he agreed. "The low-numbered vaults are the oldest ones." She was thinking, he could feel it, the focused, rapid quality that meant she was making connections. "My mother will know something about this." "Aldrich Potter," Harry said. Her eyes came to his immediately. That name was shared territory now. Apollon had said it, they'd both held it, built it into the framework of this new thing between them. The wizard who had bonded with Sylvian Delacour 300 years ago. The name in the trust. "Yes," she said. "Right." He looked at the letter again, then at the owl, then at the destroyed and partially repaired stone wall. "How quickly can we get to London?" Apollon said immediately, in the tone of someone for whom this answer was obvious. She also said she was coming, in the tone of someone for whom this was not up for discussion. Celeste said nothing but appeared at the front door at the same time as the rest of them, dressed in traveling clothes, and nobody argued because nobody was that brave. Paul said he would stay with Gabrielle, which Gabrielle protested and Paul managed by promising to let her narrate the whole afternoon in English with no objections. Gabrielle considered this and decided it was fair. The Delacour family's method of travel to London was a private portkey, licensed through the French ministry and registered with the British ministry, which Apollon produced from a locked drawer in her study. It was a silver thimble, and it activated with a word Harry didn't catch, and the transit was smoother than the copper coin that had brought him from King's Cross, deliberately so, Apollon explained, because Celeste did not do uncomfortable portkeys. Celeste, for her part, arrived at Gringotts the way she arrived everywhere, as if the building was the one that should be intimidated. Diagon Alley was different in July. Harry had been here in summers before, but it always had the quality of a place in motion, shoppers, students, the Weasleys charging ahead toward the bookshop while Mrs. Weasley counted heads. Today it was quieter in the specific way that meant people were being careful. Small groups rather than crowds. Eyes that moved quickly and settled slowly. The magical world processing a fear it hadn't been given permission to fully articulate yet. He walked through it with the Delacours and felt the attention they drew, or rather, felt the attention that had always followed him around and added to it the attention that Fleur and Apollon naturally generated, which was considerable, and felt the combination land on people they passed like a searchlight. He didn't manage it. He didn't pull his hood up or angle away from it. 9 days of Celeste Delacour's directness had done something to the reflexive urge toward invisibility. He walked through Diagon Alley at Fleur's side and let them look. Gringotts' doors opened before they reached the top step. Not the enchanted open of automatic doors, a deliberate opening, a goblin on each side, in the formal white and gold uniform of the senior staff. This was not normal. Harry had been to Gringotts a dozen times and the doors had never opened for him specifically. Master Vault Protocol, Fleur murmured. Inside, the marble hall was its usual organized chaos of transactions and movement, but their arrival sent a visible ripple through it. Goblins at the nearest windows looked up. Several conversations paused. Harry watched a senior goblin near the back of the hall register their group, say something to a colleague, and then move toward the back offices with the brisk purpose of someone going to fetch someone important. A goblin met them at the main desk. He was old in the way goblins got when they were very senior, which looked different from human old, sharper rather than softer, and he wore the kind of expression that suggested he had been waiting for this appointment, specifically, for longer than Harry had been alive. "Mr. Potter," he said. "I am Ragnarok. We have been expecting you, though not precisely when." He looked at the group behind Harry. "You bring the Delacour line." "They're with me," Harry said. "Naturally. No surprise in it. Just acknowledgement. This way." They went deeper into Gringotts than Harry had ever been. Past the regular account offices, past the vault access area, down a corridor that had the stonework of something genuinely ancient, not old, ancient, the kind of construction that had been here before the current building was built around it. The torches along the walls were greenish gold and cast light that was different in quality from magical torchlight, more like something occurring naturally in the stone. The room at the end of the corridor was large and circular and empty of furniture except for a single table in the center, plain wood, very old, with a flat surface that had clearly had things put on it over centuries and absorbed their impressions. On the table sat a locked box. Also plain. Also very old. Ragnarok did not go to the table. He stood to one side and watched Harry. "Vault 7, he said, was sealed in the year 1693 under the terms of the Aldrich-Potter Estate Trust. The conditions of the trust specified that the vault would remain sealed until a direct heir of the Potter line activated a Veela bond. The activation of such a bond would be registered in the trust instrument," he gestured to the box, "automatically, through old magic." He paused. "The instrument registered an activation 11 days ago." Harry looked at the box. "What's in the vault?" he asked. "The contents of the vault are extensive," Ragnarok said. "Assets, properties, legal instruments. But the vault also contains the Aldrich-Potter record, a document in Aldrich-Potter's own hand, intended for the heir who activates the bond. He was, A brief pause, and something moved in the goblin's face that might have been respect, very thorough. "Can I open it?" Harry said, nodding to the box. "The lock responds to Potter blood and Veela fire simultaneously," Ragnock said. "Both are required." Harry looked at Fleur. She moved to stand beside him at the table. The box had no keyhole. Just a flat surface on the lid, worn smooth with age. Harry put his left hand on his side of it, and Fleur put her right hand on hers, and the warmth in Harry's chest leapt forward like something answering a call it had been waiting for, and he felt Fleur's fire respond from her side, and between their hands the lock made a sound like a single clear note played on a very old instrument, and opened. Inside was a smaller box, also locked, with a second mechanism, this one a ring, set with a stone he didn't recognize. And under the small box, a rolled document, wax-sealed with a crest that was the ancestor of the Potter family crest, old enough that the original design was visible and the modern version was clearly derived from it. Ragnock removed the document carefully, as if it was fragile. It wasn't. Harry could see that it was preserved by magic, the kind of preservation charm that made things last centuries, and placed it on the table. "The record," he said. "You may read it here, or in privacy. The small box contains the vault key. The vault itself is available at your request." He paused. "There is also, Mr. Potter, I should prepare you. The full accounting of the Aldrich Potter Estate Trust will take some time to comprehend. It is larger than you know." "How much larger?" Harry said. Ragnock looked at him for a moment with an expression that suggested the answer required calibration. "The Potter family fortune that you currently know about," Ragnock said, "is one of 7 separate accounts held under the Potter name. The other 6 have been, dormant. Inaccessible. Sealed." He let this sit. The activation of the trust unseals all 6 simultaneously. The room was very quiet. Fleur was looking at Ragnock with sharp attention. Apollon, behind Harry, made a sound that was barely audible and was the sound of someone's theory being confirmed. Celeste said nothing but Harry felt her presence sharpen. 6 accounts, Harry said. "The consolidated value of the Aldrich Potter Estate Trust," Ragnock said, with the careful tone of someone delivering information that requires a moment to settle, "places the Potter family among the 5 wealthiest wizarding families in Britain." A pause. "And the wealthiest individual under 40 in Europe." Harry looked at the box on the table. He thought about the Dursleys, who had spent 10 years telling him he was a burden. He thought about buying second-hand school robes at the start of each year because he'd grown through the last ones. He thought about Vernon Dursley's face at Christmas, every Christmas, performing generosity that was just structured humiliation. He felt something let go. Not dramatically. Just, released. "Right," he said. His voice was entirely steady. "Can we have some privacy for the record?" Ragnock nodded, and withdrew with the grace of someone who understood that some moments required space. The record was written in an English that was 300 years old, formal, structured, the spelling different in ways that were fascinating and occasionally impenetrable. But the voice in it was clear. Aldrich Potter had been, whatever else, someone who wrote like he thought, directly, with purpose. Harry read it aloud because Fleur was beside him and Apollon and Celeste were both present, and this was, he had decided, not something that only belonged to him. Fleur translated the portions that were obscure without being asked, and Celeste filled in the magical historical context without being asked either. "To whoever opens this," Aldrich had written, "I must assume you have found your bondmaid as I found mine, which means you have discovered that the blood of our family has always carried more fire than the world thought prudent. I write this not to instruct but to prevent the mistake I nearly made, which is to say, do not let the world tell you what you are. I spent 20 years at the Ministry of Magic being used as a tool because I was too powerful to ignore and too polite to refuse. Sylvian called it the most expensive form of cowardice, and she was right in the way she was right about most things." Harry paused. Looked at Fleur. She was reading over his shoulder and she was trying to keep her expression composed and not entirely succeeding. "She sounds like you," Harry said. She was my ancestor, Fleur said, without heat. Of course she does. He read on. The record described the bond in practical terms. Aldrich was not a romantic writer, which Harry found refreshing, and outlined what it had done to his magic, which was considerable. It described the Potter family gift, which Aldrich called the sight of structure, the ability to perceive the underlying architecture of spells, curses, and magical constructs, to see them not as phenomena but as objects with seams and weak points and leverage. A bone breaker sees the bone, Aldrich had written. A healer sees the tissue. I see the spell itself, as clearly as I see this page. Sylvian's fire showed me what was already in my blood. Perhaps it will show you something that has been sleeping in yours. Harry looked at his hand. He thought about repairing the stone wall, about the feeling of sensing the structure of the stone. He thought about fourth year, priori incantatem, the spell connection between his wand and Voldemort's, the way he'd instinctively understood that the golden thread had to be maintained, not broken, that there was a structure to exploit. He'd always thought that was luck. He was beginning to understand it had never been luck. The vault contains what I leave you, Aldrich continued. Use it. Do not apologize for it. This family has spent too many generations apologizing for what it is. The bond is not a burden. It is a completion. Sylvian told me this on our first night, when I was frightened and trying not to show it. She said, the fire finds what the cold was hiding. I did not understand her. I understand her now. Harry finished reading. Rolled the document carefully. Placed it on the table. The room was quiet. He hid from what he was, Celeste said. She said it with the weight of a conclusion. For 20 years. I won't, Harry said. It wasn't a declaration. It was just a fact he was stating, like Paul announcing the name of something in the garden. Celeste looked at him with those winter sky eyes, and whatever she saw there satisfied her. No, she agreed. You will not. The vault itself was at the deepest level Harry had ever descended in Gringotts. The cart trip was longer and faster and more vertical than the route to his regular vault, which was already alarming. Fleur sat beside him with her spine straight and her hands relaxed in her lap, which was either genuine composure or very good performance, and he wasn't going to ask which because the cart was doing something that should have been physically illegal. Ragnarok rode at the front. He had the quality of someone who had made this trip before and found it entirely unremarkable. The vault door was large. That was the first thing. Not enormous in a theatrical way, just very large in the way of things built to contain something substantial, iron-black and set with the same crest as the wax seal on the record. The second lock, the ring, worked the same way as the box had, and Harry felt the door open with a weight that had nothing to do with the hinges. Inside. Harry stood in the doorway for a moment. He'd expected gold. There was gold, a great deal of it, stacked in the careful brick-like arrangement Gringotts used, along the left wall. But the vault was large enough that the gold occupied only a portion of it, and the rest was documents. Property deeds, rolled and labeled, stacked in enchanted cases. A weapons rack with 3 wands in preservation cases, each clearly significant, labeled in Aldrich's handwriting. An armor stand with a dragon hide coat that was very old and looked entirely undamaged. Several trunks with combination locks. A library shelf running along the back wall with perhaps 60 volumes, and Harry could feel, even at this distance, that the books were not ordinary, they had the specific quality of things containing active magic rather than describing it. And in the center of the vault, on a stone plinth, a single object under a glass bell jar. He crossed to it. Under the glass was a ring. The same ring from the small box. He opened the box now and looked between them, and yes, they were clearly a set, made of the same old gold, bearing the same stone he didn't recognize, which was deep red and slightly luminous and clearly not a gem he'd ever encountered. Fleur was beside him. Do you know what this is? He asked. She was looking at it with her head tilted, a slight frown of concentration. The stone, she said. I've read about it, I think. Pierre de la Maison, House Stone. It's a focus stone. Old magic, very old. It's tuned to the magic of a specific bloodline and it amplifies and anchors. She paused. It's not common. You cannot make them. You can only inherit them, and only if the bloodline is active enough to hold the tuning. She looked at him. It will respond to you because the bond is active. Before the bond it would have stayed dormant. Harry lifted the glass bell jar. The ring sat on a small velvet pad. He picked it up. It was warm, not warm from the glass, warm from itself, the specific warmth of something that had been waiting. He turned it over. Inside the band was an inscription in the same archaic English. For the one the fire finds. He looked at Fleur. She was doing the jaw thing. Put it on, she said. Her voice was controlled and careful and doing significant work. He slid it onto the ring finger of his right hand. It resized immediately, fitting itself to him with the precision of something that had been waiting for exactly this hand. The effect was immediate, not dramatic, not explosive. A deepening. Like adjusting the focus on binoculars, except what came into focus was the magical world itself. The wards on the vault became visible to him, not glowing or obvious but present in a way they hadn't been, legible, each layer distinguishable from the others. The preservation charms on the books were visible as a different layer again. The books themselves had signatures, he could feel the specific magical character of each one the way you can identify voices in a chorus. He turned, slowly, and looked at Fleur. The bond was visible. Not to anyone else, he was fairly certain it wasn't to anyone else, but to him, with the ring's amplification, he could see it as a structure. Silver gold, complex, layered, running between them with the substantiality of something physical. It was extraordinary. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Fleur was watching his face. What do you see? She asked quietly. Everything, he said. And then, because she deserved specificity, the bond. It's not a chain. It doesn't look like a chain. It looks like two flames that are touching at the base and are the same fire. She was very still. Yes, she said. Not confirming what she saw but confirming that this was right, that the description was accurate to something she understood from inside. Ragnarok, who had been standing at a perfect professional remove, cleared his throat. There is also, he said, the matter of the properties. The properties took 40 minutes to enumerate. Harry sat at a small table in the vault anteroom that Ragnarok had set up for exactly this purpose, and Ragnarok walked him through the list with the methodical pace of someone covering large amounts of ground they are familiar with. Apollon sat beside Harry and listened with sharp attention. Fleur was on his other side. Celeste stood. There was a manor in Godric's Hollow, separate from the house James and Lily had lived in, which was a ruin. This was the original Potter family estate, sealed in 1693 with the vault. There was a property in Edinburgh. There was land in Wales, a significant amount. Ragnarok described it as substantial. There were two properties in Europe, one in Italy and one, which made Fleur look up sharply, in the Dordogne region of France. How far from here? Harry asked. Fleur and Apollon looked at each other. Something passed between them. 2 hours, Apollon said. Perhaps less. It has been sealed, Ragnarok said, and has not been inhabited since 1693. However, the preservation charms are exceptional. It will be livable. Aldrich Potter lived in France, Harry said. For the last 20 years of his life, Ragnarok confirmed. With his wife. Harry thought about a wizard 3 centuries ago who had spent 20 years being used by a ministry that valued his power over his person, who had then met a Veela and found his bond and found himself and moved to France and lived there until he died. He thought about the record, the voice in it, direct, plain, slightly impatient with the world. He thought, I understand you, Aldrich Potter. Celeste was looking at him. He glanced at her. She gave a single, small nod. The Godric's Hollow Manor, Harry said. Can we visit it? At any time, Ragnarok said. It was the original family seat. The wards will recognize the ring. I'd like to see it, Harry said. Before we go back. He paused. Is there anything else I need to sign today? Inheritance documents, Ragnarok said. Full transfer of the trust to your authority. It is, substantial paperwork. Then let's get started, Harry said. Ragnarok produced a stack of parchment that was, indeed, substantial. Harry looked at it. Looked at the ring on his right hand. Looked at Fleur, who was looking at the parchment with the professional assessing gaze of someone who had studied contract law as part of her curse-breaking apprenticeship. Read each page before you sign, she said. Do not let the bank's urgency become your urgency. Ragnarok, to his credit, looked faintly amused. She is correct, he said. Harry pulled the stack toward him. Fleur leaned in, and Apollon leaned in on the other side, and Celeste stood behind them all in the manner of a general observing a campaign that is going exactly as planned. Harry signed. Methodically, clearly, reading each page because Fleur was reading it first, and if she found something she said so, twice, and Harry adjusted the terms accordingly, and Ragnarok made the amendments without complaint, which suggested the amendments were fair. They finished at 2:30. Outside, Diagon Alley was doing its afternoon business in a careful, slightly muted way of a world trying to pretend that nothing was wrong. Harry stood on the steps of Gringotts with the ring warm on his right hand and the vault key in his pocket and 6 sealed properties in his name and a 300-year-old letter from a man who had lived enough of the same life to know what to say about it. He felt like a different person than the one who'd stepped off the Hogwarts Express 10 days ago. Not a different person. The same person, but with the ceiling off. Fleur stood beside him, looking out at the alley. The manor, she said. You want to see it today. If you'll come with me. She looked at him. The afternoon light was doing things with her hair that he was developing the self-discipline not to be distracted by, mostly successfully. Obviously, she said. Someone needs to make sure you don't walk into a 300-year-old curse architecture and accidentally level Godric's Hollow. Is that likely? She considered. For you specifically? Yes, I think so. Fair, he said. Apollon, who had been listening to all of this with her precise warmth, stepped up beside him. There is one more thing, she said. Before we go to the manor. Harry. He turned to her. Dumbledore will have been notified of the vault opening, she said. Gringotts notifies the Ministry. The Ministry notifies relevant parties. He will know by this evening. Harry held this for a moment. Okay, he said. Are you prepared for that conversation? He thought about it. About the letter Dumbledore had sent to Privet Drive in June, which had arrived 2 days after Harry should have been there and had been forwarded to the chateau through the post, a careful, warm, concerned letter that said very little of substance while appearing to say a great deal. He'd read it twice and felt, with a clarity he hadn't always had, the shape of what Dumbledore wanted from him, which was managed. He looked at the ring. He thought about Aldrich Potter spending 20 years being a useful tool. Yes, he said. I'm prepared. Celeste, from behind him, made a sound that was very nearly approval. Chapter 4, The Minister's Dogs. The Godric's Hollow Manor stood at the end of a lane that had forgotten it was a lane. Trees had grown over it, brambles had reclaimed the edges, and the stones of the path had settled unevenly into the earth over 3 centuries of unattended time. But the manor itself, a low, wide building of dark stone with deep-set windows and a roofline that suggested something older than the architectural style it wore, was intact in the way of things that have been very thoroughly protected. Not pristine. Present. The magic in the wards had kept the structure sound while letting the land around it go wild, and the result was a house that looked like it had been quietly waiting rather than abandoned. Harry stood at the gate, iron, old, worked in a pattern he now recognized as the Aldrich Potter crest, and put his right hand flat against it. The gate opened. Not swung open. Opened, the way a hand unclenches, a gradual release of held breath. The wards around the property shifted visibly to him through the ring's amplification, moving from the specific quality of sealed to something warmer, the way a house changes when someone turns on a light inside it. The wards know the ring, Fleur said. They know me, Harry said. Which was different. He could feel it, not the ring being recognized but him, specifically, the particular signature of his magic, which the wards had been calibrated to eventually receive. Aldrich had built this to wait for Harry. 300 years ago, a man he'd never met had built a set of wards and set them to sleep until a specific person came home. He walked through the gate. The others followed, Fleur, then Apollon, then Celeste, who crossed the threshold and stood very still for a moment in the way of someone taking an inventory, then gave a small satisfied nod as if the manor had passed inspection. Inside was dim and cool and dust-sheeted in the manner of things preserved rather than abandoned. The furniture was under white linen. The floors were flagstone, dark with age, and Harry's footsteps were very loud in the silence. The ceiling in the entrance hall was high enough to feel generous, and there were windows set deep in the stone that the afternoon light came through at angles, making long gold bars on the floor. He pulled a sheet off the nearest thing, a chair, old oak, built for permanence, and the dust rose and settled and the chair was fine underneath. Sound. As if someone had sat in it recently and gotten up and gone to find something. Fleur moved through the ground floor with her curse-breaker's attention engaged, looking at the walls and the doorframes and the decorative elements with an eye for architectural magic. She'd explained this to him over the last several days, that old magical buildings encoded their history into their physical structure, that you could read a house the way you read a book if you knew the alphabet. No malicious enchantments, she reported, coming back from the study off the main hall. The preservation work is, she paused, the way she did when something impressed her, exceptional, actually. Whoever cast these original charms was very skilled. Aldrich Potter, Apollon said, from where she was examining a portrait at the far end of the hall. Harry went to her. The portrait was covered, but smaller than the others, personal rather than formal. He lifted the sheet. 2 people. A man and a woman, painted in the style of the late 17th century, and very clearly alive in the portrait sense, sleeping, or rather stilled, in the way magical portraits went when they'd been under covers for extended periods. As Harry watched, the man stirred. Blinked. His eyes were the same hazel as Harry's father's. The jaw was different and the hair was dark rather than unruly, but the eyes were unmistakable, and there was something around the set of his mouth that Harry recognized from mirrors as a feature he'd assumed came from James. It came from much further back than James. Potter, the man said. His voice was slightly blurred with the long sleep, the way voices are at 4 in the morning. Which one are you? Harry, Harry said. James's son. Aldrich Potter looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at Harry's right hand, where the ring sat. Then he looked at Fleur, who had come to stand beside Harry without either of them deciding it. And Aldrich Potter smiled. It was not a subtle smile. It was the smile of a man who bet on something long ago and has just won, enormously, and feels entirely justified. There she is, he said, and the woman beside him in the portrait, silver gold hair, blue eyes with the gold fire Harry knew now, Fleur's cheekbones 400 years back, opened her own eyes and looked at them both with the expression of someone unsurprised by a miracle they always expected. Ma petite, Sylvian Delacour said, to Fleur, in a voice like warm copper. Tu es belle. Fleur made a sound that was not a word. The jaw-tightening thing, but overwhelmed, the containment giving slightly at the edges. Et brave? Fleur managed. Evidement, said Sylvian, with the exact tone of Celeste saying bien. Harry looked at Aldrich. I read your letter, he said. I imagined you would. Aldrich settled in his frame with the ease of someone who had been somewhere long enough to be comfortable. The question is what you made of it. That you wasted 20 years, Harry said, being used by people who needed you useful and kept you from being anything else. Aldrich's smile sharpened. Yes, he said. That's the lesson. Good. Most people read the part about the vault and miss the part about the ministry. He looked at Harry steadily. You won't make the same mistake. No, Harry said. I won't. They stayed an hour, and by the end of it Harry had plans, not vague intentions, actual plans, the Delacour women moving through the house with the practical energy of people who understood that claiming a space was done through use rather than ownership documents. Apollon identified 3 rooms that needed specific ward reinforcements. Celeste inspected the cellar library, a second library, smaller than the vaults, and full of books Aldrich had kept for daily use, and emerged with the expression of someone who had found something they had been looking for 40 years. Fleur stood with Harry in the kitchen at the back of the house, which was large and faced the overgrown garden, and looked out at the chaos of 3 centuries of unattended growth. You could live here, she said. I know, he said. Not should. Could. She was parsing something, turning it over. It is your choice. I am not, Fleur. She looked at him. I know, he said again, and he meant both things, that it was his choice, and that he was going to make it. She held his gaze for a moment. Satisfied. Filed it. They went back to the chateau by Apollon's portkey in the late afternoon, carrying dust and discovery and the particular quality of tiredness that comes from having done something real. Harry felt the warmth in his chest through all of it, steady, definitive, a constant that made the whole day feel like it had a floor. He had no idea what was coming the next morning. Apollon's warning about the ministry had been accurate in direction if not in timing. The owl she'd expected by evening came instead at 6 the next morning, and it was not from Dumbledore. It was from the Ministry of Magic. Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Signed not by the minister or even the senior Auror office, but by a name Harry didn't recognize, R. Whitmore, Senior Investigative Officer, Special Projects Division. Harry read it at the kitchen table, Paul across from him with coffee, and put it down. Special Projects Division, Paul said. He had a very particular stillness. I know this division. It does not do projects. What does it do? Harry said. Paul looked at him with those kind, tired eyes. It is used when the ministry wants something done and does not want it attributed to the ministry. Apollon came in, read the letter over Harry's shoulder, and said a word in French that Gabrielle, appearing in the doorway, repeated immediately. Gabrielle, Fleur said, from behind her. J'ai entendu de maman, Gabrielle said, entirely reasonably. Apollon took the letter. Read it again. Set it on the table and looked at Harry with expression of someone who was rearranging their understanding of a situation. This is not standard ministry procedure, she said. The Gringotts notification goes to the Department of Magical Finance. This has gone somewhere else first. She paused. Someone is running this independently of the standard channels. Who would do that? Harry said. Someone with ministry access and a private agenda, Apollon said. Harry thought about the graveyard. He thought about Voldemort saying that his ministry contacts were in place, that the ministry was not as clean as it believed itself to be. He thought about Dumbledore's careful, managed letters. He thought about a world where the official story was that Harry Potter was delusional and Voldemort was dead, and someone somewhere needed that story maintained. I'm not going to the ministry, Harry said. Not on their terms. Fleur, who had been reading the letter from across the table, looked up. No, she agreed. You are not. We should, Apollon began. The wards on the chateau flared. Harry felt it through the ring, a sudden spike in the ambient magic of the property, the specific quality of the ward activation that meant someone was attempting to enter without invitation. He was on his feet before he'd decided to stand. Fleur was already up. How many, she said. Not asking Harry, asking the wards, she had a Cursebreaker's connection to the property's magical architecture from days of working with it. 3, Apollon said. She had her wand out, a long, pale wand that Harry had never seen her draw before, and the ease with which she held it told him something important about Apollon Delacour he'd been only partially aware of. They are attempting a ward bypass. Ministry-authorized technique. Can they get through? Harry said. Not before we decide whether to let them, Apollon said. The wards here are mine. They comply with no ministry authorization. Paul had moved, quietly, smoothly, with the specific economy of a man who had married into a Veela family and had long ago accepted that his role in a crisis was to get the children somewhere else. Gabrielle appeared at the kitchen door and Paul was there, hand on her shoulder, moving her back. Tu est que est passé? Gabrielle demanded. Viens avec moi, Paul said, firmly. Mais, Gabrielle. That tone. She went. Harry looked at Fleur. She was standing very still with her wand out and her expression doing the thing where it had simplified, all the layers gone, just the essential Fleur underneath, focused and entirely unafraid. They will escalate when the ward bypass fails, she said. Let them, Harry said. He went to the front door. The three figures outside the chateau gates were in ministry robes, the neutral grey of field officers rather than the red of aurors, which confirmed Paul's assessment that this was the unofficial arm of something. Two were standing back, positioned like people who'd been told to cover exits. The third was at the gate itself, performing what was clearly an attempt at a ward dissolution that wasn't working. Harry opened the front door and walked out. He crossed the garden at a pace that was unhurried because there was no reason to hurry. The gate was still closed. The ward dissolution attempt was failing because Apollon's wards were not built on ministry standard architecture and the ministry standard counter didn't fit the lock. The man at the gate looked up when Harry appeared. He was middle-aged, unremarkable in the way of a person who had cultivated unremarkableness professionally, with the specific look of someone who had expected to find a 15-year-old boy at a disadvantage. He had not accounted for what he found. Mr. Potter, he said. Attempting authority. I'm Senior Investigative Officer Whitmore. I have a ministry warrant, you have a piece of paper, Harry said. He stopped 6 feet from the gate. You don't have French ministry authority, which is what you'd need to act on this property. You don't have the legal standing to compel me to anything because I'm a British citizen currently residing legally in France under a guest residency registered with the French ministry by the Delacour family. Whitmore's expression shifted. How did you? Apollon Delacour filed the paperwork the day I arrived, Harry said. She is thorough. He looked at the man steadily. I'm also going to tell you that the ward bypass technique you're using doesn't work on Delacour wards because they're not built on ministry standard architecture. You would know that if whoever sent you had given you accurate information. The second figure moved. Harry felt it rather than saw it, a shift in position, a wand coming up at the edge of his vision. He turned his head. I wouldn't, he said. The figure, a woman, young, with the slightly uncomfortable expression of someone who had been given a job that was expanding beyond its stated scope, looked at him. Harry held her gaze with the absolute calm of someone who has been in actual danger and knows the difference between that and this. She lowered her wand. Whitmore tried again. Mr. Potter, the trust legitimacy questions are serious, they're not, Harry said. Gringotts authenticated the trust through full bloodline verification. Ragnarok personally oversaw the process. If the ministry has questions about Gringotts' authentication procedures, they are welcome to take that up with Gringotts, which I look forward to watching from a distance. He paused. Who sent you, Whitmore? The Department of, specifically, Harry said. What name authorized this operation? Fudge. A flicker. Whitmore's face doing something involuntary. Not Fudge, Harry said. Who? Whitmore straightened. The unremarkable face going back to its professional neutrality. I'm not at liberty, then we're done, Harry said. You have 48 hours to produce French ministry authorization before the Delacour family files a formal complaint of territorial breach with the French ministry's Magical Law Enforcement Division. He looked at all three of them. Do not come back without that authorization. He turned and walked back toward the house. Behind him, Fleur was standing in the doorway. She'd watched the whole thing from there, wand in hand, and the expression on her face was one he hadn't seen before, something between assessment and something warmer, the specific look of a person watching someone they have been deciding about finally decide something clearly. He reached her. They went inside. "Pierre de la Maison," she said, as he closed the door. "The house stone. Did you feel the ward structure?" "I saw it," he said. "The whole thing. Every layer, where the bypass was hitting, why it wasn't working." "That is the site of structure," she said. "What Aldrich described." "Yes." He leaned against the wall for a moment. The encounter hadn't scared him, that was the thing he was processing. It should have, perhaps. 3 ministry field officers was not a small thing. But he'd felt the shape of the situation clearly, every advantage and disadvantage mapped, and the advantages had been substantially his. Who sent them? "Someone who has ministry access and does not want you to have the trust," Apollon said, from the kitchen doorway. "The trust gives you resources and legal standing and independence. Someone finds that inconvenient." Harry thought about it. "Whitmore's face when I said fudge," he said. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition. As if fudge was the decoy I was supposed to think of. Apollon was quiet for a moment. "Maman," Fleur said. "I have a suspicion," Apollon said carefully. "But it requires confirmation." "Tell me the suspicion," Harry said. Apollon looked at him. Then she made a decision, he saw it, the slight change in posture that meant she'd chosen to be direct. "Bartemius Crouch Sr., she said. "He is, or was, one of the most senior figures in magical law enforcement in Britain. He was reported to have suffered a breakdown and been confined at home. But there are, people in the French ministry who believe he did not break down. That what broke was his grip on appearances." She paused. "He was obsessed, before the breakdown, with Voldemort's resurgence as a possibility. He had files, positions, plans. He has spent 30 years in a war, Harry, against Voldemort's followers, against dark magic, against anything that threatened the order he believed in." "Voldemort is back," Harry said. "Which means everything Crouch spent 30 years fighting is real again. And everything he was told had changed," Apollon said, "has been confirmed as a lie. His son died. His career was destroyed. The war he sacrificed everything for was apparently not over." She looked at him steadily. "A man like that, who has been confirmed in his worst fears, who has access to ministry machinery he built himself over decades, that is a very specific kind of dangerous." Harry sat down at the kitchen table. The ring was warm on his hand. The warmth in his chest was steady. Fleur sat across from him with her elbows on the table and her expression doing its thinking hard thing. "What does he want?" Harry said. "What they always want," Fleur said, with the slight bitterness of someone who has watched this pattern before. "To control the thing they think is the solution. You defeated Voldemort at 1 year old. You survived the graveyard. In Crouch's mind," she paused, "in the mind of someone who has been fighting this war alone and in secret for years, you are not a person. You are a weapon. And weapons should be held by the people who know how to point them." The room was quiet for a moment. "He's not going to manage that," Harry said. "No," said Celeste, from her chair in the corner, where she had been sitting so still that Harry had genuinely forgotten she was there. "He is not." The letter to Hermione was Harry's idea. He wrote it that afternoon in his east-facing room while the valley did its golden afternoon thing outside his window. He'd written to Ron and Hermione every few days since arriving, brief letters, deliberately light, not wanting to put anything important in Owl Post that could be intercepted. But this needed more. He wrote 3 pages. Clearly, specifically, with dates and names and facts, the way Hermione had taught him without realizing she was teaching him. She'd always modeled the practice of stating things precisely and he'd absorbed it. He described Gringotts, the trust, Whitmore's visit, Apollin's theory about Crouch. He wrote it in the code they'd established in second year, the one Hermione had designed for passing information in front of Umbridge, not complex, but effective. At the bottom he wrote, "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Tell Ron he owes me nothing except maybe a letter explaining whether the canons have been as bad as I expect." He sent it with Hedwig, who had been fed well in France and was flying with the confidence of a fully satisfied owl. Then he went back downstairs and found Fleur in the sitting room with a book, and she looked up when he came in and said, "Sit," in the manner of her grandmother, which he'd noticed she did when she was comfortable, and he sat and read over her shoulder for a while because the book was a curse-breaking text that was more interesting than it sounded. "Crouch," he said, after a while. If Apollon is right and he's running this from the Ministry's shadow, he's going to escalate when Whitmore reports back." "Yes," she agreed. "He'll need French Ministry authorization that he can't get through official channels because the French Ministry doesn't answer to him. Harry turned this over. But he built the Ministry's special operations machinery. He's been running Grey operations for 30 years. There are ways around authorization requirements," Fleur said. "False paperwork. Unofficial warrants. Informants." She turned a page. "My mother has already contacted the French Ministry's liaison office. We are formally registered as requesting protective status for the property." "When did she do that?" "While you were writing your letter." "She's thorough," Fleur said. "Yes. She has mentioned." He smiled. She caught it peripherally and something at the corner of her mouth responded. "The bond," Harry said. "You said the amplification was growing. Every day." She set the book down and looked at him properly. "The fire is louder than it has ever been. I have always been able to produce heat without a wand, but since the bond one can do things I couldn't before." She held out her hand, palm up, and the fire came, and it was larger than the first day he'd seen it and more controlled simultaneously, more clearly hers, not wild, directed. At Beau's Batons, the instructors were always trying to tone it down. Manage it. Keep it within the standard parameters. And now. She let the fire climb up her arm, and this time it kept going, shoulder, neck, and then her hair caught it, and for a moment she was sitting in the sitting room of a French chateau with fire in her hair and she was entirely unburned and entirely unafraid, the blue of her eyes gone entirely gold. "Now," she said, "I am not interested in standard parameters." The fire subsided. Normal Fleur again, except that normal Fleur was, well, not standard. "The bond is going to keep growing," Harry said. "Until it's fully established, yes. 3 months, my mother estimates, for the primary development phase." "What happens after 3 months?" She looked at him steadily. "Then it is simply what we are." She picked up the book again. "Which is fine." "Is it?" he said. Not challenging, genuinely asking, he wanted to know what she thought. She was quiet for a moment. The sort of quiet she got when she was deciding to say the real thing instead of the managed thing. "I spent a year at Hogwarts being looked through," she said. "People looked at me and saw the Veela heritage and decided they knew what I was. Useful for decoration or frightening for power, take your pick." She didn't say it with self-pity. Just as a fact. "The bond is, it is the first thing that has looked at me and seen more than I present. Not through me. Through to what is actually there." She glanced at him. "So yes. It is fine. It is more than fine. Back to the book. Do not make me say that again." "I won't," he said. "Good." He sat with her in the sitting room until the evening came in through the windows and Paul called them for dinner, and the warmth in his chest was a steady fire the whole time. The second visit came 2 days later. Not Whitmore this time. 5 figures, not 3, and this time they didn't bother with the gate. They apparat directly into the outer garden, inside the property boundary but outside the inner wards, which meant someone had given them the frequency of the outer ward specifically. Harry was in the practice ground when he felt it. The ring gave a pulse like an alarm, specific and directional, and he turned north and was already moving. Fleur was faster. She came out of the orchard at a run and didn't slow, and when she hit the edge of the inner ward line she stopped and assessed with those golden blue eyes for exactly 2 seconds. 5, she said. 2 have French ministry badges, real ones, not forged. 3 are British. The British ones are not ours. Harry felt them through the ring, the shape of their magic, the specific signatures. The 2 French officers were doing what official French officers did, which was standing at a cautious distance and looking somewhat uncomfortable. The 3 British figures were different, tighter, more focused, and one of them was carrying something that Harry could feel before he could see, a cold object, magically dense, with a curse architecture he recognized from the curse-breaking texts Fleur had been making him read. The one on the left has a cursed object, Harry said. Fleur looked at him. Then at the figure. Containment vessel, she said. Those are used for, she stopped. They are not here to arrest you. They are here to curse you. I know, Harry said. He walked forward through the inner ward line. Fleur walked with him. The figure on the left, a broad man with a forgettable face and the careful stillness of someone who'd done this sort of thing professionally before, registered their approach and his hand moved toward the containment vessel. Harry already knew the architecture of the curse inside it. He'd read enough of Fleur's texts to understand the seams and the weak points, and the ring's amplification meant those seams were clearly visible, lit up like fault lines. He raised his hand, not his wand, his hand, the ring hand, and felt the structure of the curse in the vessel and found the point where the containment architecture held it together, and he pulled. The curse dissolved from the inside. The vessel cracked clean down the middle and the broad man jumped back as if burned, which he probably was, because curse containment vessels apparently get hot when the contained curse inverts, which Harry filed under useful to know. Drop everything you're holding, Fleur said, in the tone of someone confirming that a result is what she expected. Nobody dropped anything. The fire in her right hand was very real and very large and extremely specific in its intention, and the 2 French ministry officers stepped back automatically because they were professionals and they recognized a threat assessment when it was standing in front of them. We have French authorization, one of the British figures started. You have French authorization to observe, Fleur said. You do not have French authorization to bring a cursed object onto privately registered French magical property. She looked at the 2 French officers. Say exact. The French officers looked at each other with the expression of people who had been told they were here for a routine property inspection and were now significantly regretting their mourning. Exact, said the senior one, with the resigned dignity of someone drawing a clear legal line. There is going to be a formal complaint, Harry said, to the broad man, who was nursing a burned hand and no longer had his containment vessel. From Gringotts, from the French ministry, and from me personally. Your authorization for this operation will be reviewed. He paused. Tell whoever sent you that I'm not difficult to find. If they want to talk, they can come themselves. You don't want to play this game, Potter, the broad man said. His voice had the flat quality of someone delivering a message rather than expressing an opinion. The person running this operation has been playing it for 30 years. I know, Harry said. Crouch. Bartemius Crouch Sr., who was declared mentally unfit 2 months ago and is apparently running special ministry operations in his spare time. He watched the man's face do something involuntary. Tell him I said hello. The 3 British figures left. The French one stayed long enough to document the cracked containment vessel, which they did with the slightly grim efficiency of people who know exactly what the paperwork is going to look like, and then left too. The outer ward resealed behind them. Fleur extinguished her fire and stood in the garden in the aftermath quiet. You named him aloud, she said. Yes. He'll know now that you know. Good, Harry said. I want him to know. She looked at him with that expression again, the one that was trying to finish deciding something. Most people, when they discover they have a serious enemy, try to hide their knowledge of it. Use it as advantage. I know, he said. Crouch is counting on me doing that. Counting on me trying to figure out his move so I can get ahead of it quietly, without confrontation. That's how Dumbledore would play it. He shook his head. I'm not going to play his game on his board. If he wants to come at me, I want him to come at me openly, on terms where what happens is visible. And if he does, she said. Then he finds out what the bond has made us, Harry said. Not me. Us. Fleur heard the difference. Her eyes did the golden flicker thing. Your Hermione will have information soon, she said. About Crouch. She's already researching, Harry said. He could practically feel it from France, Hermione receiving his letter, decoding it, immediately hitting the library. She'll know something useful within a week. And Dumbledore? Harry looked out at the garden, at the lavender and the roses and the valley beyond the wall. Dumbledore is going to come here, he said. I don't know when. But he's going to come. The evening was beginning its slow performance over the valley. The sky going from blue to rose, the lavender doing its best in the last of the light. Somewhere behind them in the house, Paul was starting dinner, and Gabrielle was almost certainly providing full English commentary on the process. When he does, Fleur said, you will not be alone. Harry looked at her. The ring was warm. The warmth in his chest was a steady, confident fire. The bond between them was visible to him, silver gold and complex and permanent, the same fire at two bases, and it had never felt like a chain and it never would. I know, he said. They went inside together. Chapter 5, Flames and Fault Lines. Hermione's reply came 5 days after Harry sent his letter. It was 12 pages long, which was exactly what he'd expected, written in the same code and packed with the specific density of information that Hermione produced when she'd been given a problem and uninterrupted library access. Harry read it at the kitchen table with Fleur reading over his left shoulder and Apollon reading over his right, which was slightly crowded but nobody mentioned it. The first 4 pages were Crouch. Hermione had found 3 things through research and 1 thing through what she described, with characteristic understatement, as a productive conversation with a ministry contact Dad plays golf with. The first thing, Bartemius Crouch Sr. had not been confined to his home in any official capacity. The ministry had issued a statement about his health but no legal instrument, no guardianship order, no medical certification, nothing that would constitute actual confinement. He was, legally, entirely free to act. The second thing, the Special Projects Division had been created by Crouch himself in 1979, at the height of the First War, as a unit that reported directly to the Senior Undersecretary's office rather than through standard channels. When Crouch's public role collapsed, the division had technically been dissolved. Technically. The third thing, 7 months ago, 3 months before the Triwizard Tournament, a series of financial instruments in the Ministry's dark asset seizure accounts, assets confiscated from Death Eaters during the trials Crouch had prosecuted, had been quietly liquidated. The money had moved through 4 accounts before disappearing. Hermione had not been able to follow it further but she had circled the dates in red and written this funded something in the margin. The fourth thing, the golf contact thing, Cornelius Fudge had received a private letter in early May, around the time of the third task. He had been, according to the contact, frightened by its contents. He had not shared those contents with anyone. He had, shortly after receiving it, stopped publicly calling Harry Potter delusional and had instead switched to a vaguer, less confrontational line about institutional concerns regarding the tournament's management. As if someone had told him that the Potter problem was being handled and he didn't need to do anything except stay out of the way. Harry set the letter down. Crouch told Fudge to stand down, he said. He has leverage over Fudge, Apollon said. He spent 30 years in that ministry. He knows where everything is buried because he buried most of it. And Fudge is afraid of Voldemort being real, Fleur said. If Crouch told him, demonstrated that he had a plan to manage the situation, Fudge would be relieved to let someone else carry it. The plan being me, Harry said. The plan being you, Apollon confirmed. Harry looked at the letter. At Hermione's careful handwriting, the underlines and marginal notes, the 12 pages of work she'd done in 5 days because he'd asked and she was Hermione. He thought about Crouch. He'd been thinking about Crouch for days now, building a picture from Apollon's framework and Fleur's analysis and his own memory of the man at the Quidditch World Cup, rigid, cold, driven, the kind of person who had mistaken discipline for morality so long ago that the distinction no longer existed for him. A man who had sent his own son to Azkaban. Who had prosecuted people with a thoroughness that had gone beyond justice into something uglier, and had been celebrated for it, and had built an identity entirely out of being the person who did what was necessary. And now Voldemort was back and everything Crouch had sacrificed and everything he had done and all the compromises that had seemed necessary were waiting for justification that only winning could provide. He needs me functional, Harry said slowly. Not autonomous. He needs me as an instrument. Which means his goal is not to hurt me, it's to control me. The cursed object the other day, he thought back to the ward pulse, the specific architecture of what had been inside the containment vessel. It wasn't an attack curse. I felt the structure. It was a binding curse. Something meant to attach. Fleur turned and looked at him fully. You are certain? The architecture had anchor points. Attack curses don't have anchor points. They have a delivery mechanism and a damage profile. This had 3 anchor points and a dormancy layer. He touched the ring. I could see the whole structure. I pulled the dormancy layer and the whole thing inverted. A binding curse with a dormancy layer, Fleur said, and her voice had gone to the specific flat register that meant she was angry. It would have attached and been inactive until triggered remotely. He could have called it at any point and you would have been, she stopped. Manageable, Harry said. Yes. The fire in her hands was not currently present but the quality of her stillness suggested it was considering arriving. He won't try that again, Harry said. He knows I can see curse architecture now. He'll need a different approach. Which means he will change tactics, Apollon said. More sophisticated. Less direct. She was quiet for a moment. Or he will change targets. The kitchen went still. Harry looked at her. Not you, she said, quickly. He is not stupid enough to harm you directly when he needs you functional. But, the people around you. She met his eyes. It is what he has always done. Crouch built a career on pressure through proximity. He doesn't come at the thing he wants. He comes at the things the thing cares about. Harry thought about Fleur. About Paul and Gabrielle and Apollon. About Celeste in her chair with her winter sky eyes and her 40 years of waiting. About the chateau with its lavender borders and its old stone and the valley going gold every evening. About Hermione and Ron, in England, who had received his letter and were now demonstrably connected to him in writing. I need to warn Ron and Hermione, he said. Already in progress, Fleur said, and when he looked at her, she shrugged with one shoulder. I wrote to them while you were reading. My letter was shorter than yours would have been. He stared at her. What? She said. I am faster when I have less to say. What did you tell them? That they should assume their correspondence with you is being monitored, that they should vary their owl routes, and that if anything unusual happens near their homes they should contact us immediately through a port key I included that goes directly to my mother's sitting room. She picked up her coffee cup. And that the canons are always bad, in answer to Ron's last letter, and he should accept this. Harry looked at her for a long moment. Thank you, he said. She drank her coffee. Obviously, she said. The morning Dumbledore came, there was no warning. Not through Owl Post, not through any ministry notification, not through the wards, which was the thing that made Harry pay attention, because arriving at a Delacour property unannounced without triggering even a ripple in the outer ward was not an accident. It was skill. Extraordinary, deliberate skill, the kind that required both the ability to suppress your magical signature and the knowledge of which specific frequencies Apollon's wards were tuned to, and there was only a limited number of people in the world who could do both. Harry was in the practice ground. Alone, which was unusual. Celeste had been occupied in the cellar library all morning with one of the books from Vault 7 that had apparently said something that required immediate and focused attention, and Fleur was upstairs writing a formal complaint to the French Ministry's Magical Law Enforcement Division about the second visit, which needed to be in legal French and was therefore taking the time it required. He felt the presence before he saw it, not through the ring, through something more fundamental, the specific quality of attention from someone very powerful. He turned. Albus Dumbledore was standing at the edge of the practice ground, wearing traveling robes in a deep blue that somehow managed to be both practical and theatrical, his half-moon spectacles catching the morning light. His white hair was the same extraordinary architecture it always was. He looked exactly like himself, which meant he looked like the most powerful wizard Harry had ever personally known, which was a fact that Harry held without the awe he'd once attached to it. "Harry," Dumbledore said. His voice was warm. It was always warm. "You are looking well." "I am well," Harry said. He didn't move toward him. "How did you get through the wards?" A slight smile. "I have known Apollon Delacour for many years. I know the character of her work." He paused. "Though I confess the inner layer gave me more difficulty than I expected. She has improved." "She's had good reason to improve them recently," Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him with those blue eyes that always had the quality of reading something slightly behind what you were showing. "Yes. I heard about the visits. I'm sorry I was not aware sooner." "Were you not?" Harry said. Simply. "Not aggressive. Just asking." A beat of quiet. "You are asking whether I knew about Crouch," Dumbledore said. "I'm asking whether you knew he was active," Harry said. "Whether the Special Projects Division was on your radar. Whether any of the Ministry financial movements that Hermione tracked were things you'd noticed." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment that was different from his usual pause. The usual pause was considered and gentle. This one was the pause of a man deciding how much truth to carry to a specific conversation. He walked to the stone wall, repaired, mostly, with the exception of one section Harry and Fleur had destroyed and rebuilt 3 times in the process of learning something specific about combined spellwork, and sat on it with the ease of a much younger man. "Sit with me," he said. Harry sat. Not beside him, on the wall at a right angle, facing him, because he wanted to see his face. "I knew Crouch was active," Dumbledore said. "I did not know about the Special Projects Division's revival until 2 weeks ago. When I did learn of it, I was," he chose his word with the care of someone who had been choosing words for a very long time, "concerned." "Concerned," Harry said. "Yes. But you didn't reach out to me." "I was gathering information first," Dumbledore said. "I wanted to understand the full scope before you managed the conversation," Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him. Something shifted in those blue eyes, a slight recalibration, the look of a man who has been studied more accurately than he expected. "That is a precise way of putting it," he said. "It's accurate," Harry said. "You gather information and then you decide what I need to know. You've always done that. I used to think it was because you didn't trust me. I think now it's because you've been running a very long campaign and you're used to managing all the pieces on the board, and the problem is that I'm not a piece." The morning was quiet around them. Somewhere in the orchard a bird was doing its thing. The lavender was making the air smell like itself. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "You are not." He looked at his hands, long, capable hands, the right one still bearing the blackened damage from the ring Horcrux that Harry had heard about through Hermione's contacts. "I have spent 60 years fighting a war that has never fully ended. In those 60 years I have made decisions, about people, about information, about what to share and when, that I believed were correct. Some of them were. Some of them were not." He looked up. "The blood wards at your aunt's house. The decision to keep you there. I know about the ceiling, Harry said. The suppression. Dumbledore's expression did something small and complex. Apollon told you. Yes. It was not intentional, Dumbledore said. I want you to know that. The suppression was a consequence of the ward architecture, not a design. I did not intend to limit you. I intended to protect you. He paused. That distinction may not matter much to you. It matters, Harry said. But it doesn't fix what it was. No, Dumbledore agreed. It does not. This was the most honest conversation Harry had ever had with Dumbledore. He'd expected it to feel like a confrontation, but it didn't. It felt like two people finally occupying the same room after a long time of standing in adjacent ones. The anger he'd carried toward Dumbledore in the past, the hot, helpless anger of someone kept in the dark for their own good, was still there, but it was sitting differently, not as fire but as ballast. Useful weight. Crouch, Harry said. What do you know? More than I can tell you without compromising sources, Dumbledore said, and held up a hand before Harry could speak. I know how that sounds. I know why it sounds like the same management you're objecting to. But these are not your sources to burn, Harry. There are people inside the Ministry infrastructure whose safety depends on their anonymity. Harry held this. He tested it for manipulation and found that it was, mostly straight. There was a reason in it that was genuine, wrapped around a control instinct that was also genuine. Then tell me what you can tell me, he said. And I will tell you what I know. And we will try something new, which is treating this as an exchange between people who both have relevant information, rather than a briefing. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled, not the warm, managed smile, a different one, smaller and more real. You have changed considerably, he said, and there was something in it that was not quite pride but was in that neighborhood. The bond, Harry said. In part. But I think the bond has mostly removed things that were in the way. Dumbledore's gaze was direct. Alastor always said you were more than you were being allowed to be. He said it after your third year, after the Patronus incident. I'm afraid I was insufficiently attentive to what he meant. Harry thought about Moody, the real one, not the imposter who'd spent a year wearing his face. Thought about the gruff, constant vigilance energy that had always felt like it was aimed at him specifically, not as a warning but as a challenge. Constant vigilance was a battle cry. But also a compliment, in disguise. What do you know about Crouch that you can tell me, he said. Dumbledore settled on the wall. And for the next 40 minutes they talked, actually talked, with information going both ways, Harry telling him about the containment vessel's binding architecture and Dumbledore confirming that it matched a technique Crouch had developed in the late 70s, Harry laying out Hermione's financial tracking and Dumbledore filling in two of the gaps with what his sources had found, Harry naming the French officers who'd been present at the second visit and Dumbledore identifying one of them as a Crouch contact going back a decade. It was, Harry thought, what this relationship should have been for 5 years. He didn't say that aloud. It wasn't kind and it wasn't useful. But he thought it. He will escalate, Dumbledore said, when they'd covered the ground. He has always escalated when his initial approach fails. It is the defining feature of his methodology. He does not retreat and adapt. He presses harder. He's going to come here, Harry said. Eventually. He prefers to work through proxies, but he has a tell: when a proxy operation fails 3 times, he removes the proxy. Dumbledore looked at him over his spectacles. The 2 visits constitute 2 failures. He will not send a third team. He'll come himself, Harry said. I believe so. Good, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him. I want him to come here, Harry said. On my ground. With the wards Apollon built and Celeste improved and Fleur knows from the inside. Where he has no infrastructure and no authorization and no proxies. He looked at the ring on his hand. He's been running operations in the dark because that's where his power lives. I want this in the open. You are planning to expose him, Dumbledore said slowly. I'm planning to give him nowhere to be except visible, Harry said. That's different. The blue eyes were studying him with something that was entirely genuine. Your ancestor Aldrich, Dumbledore said quietly, refused to work within the Ministry's framework after a certain point. He was considered dangerously independent by the establishment of his time. I read his letter, Harry said. I know, Dumbledore said. I have read it too. He paused. Gringotts notified me when the trust opened. I have been aware of the Aldrich Potter record for 40 years, it is mentioned in the historical texts I have access to. I hoped, when you were born, that you would be the one to activate it. He paused. I did not know about the Delacour connection. Not fully. I am, something in his expression that was genuinely complex, humbled by how much was arranged before I arrived in the picture. 300 years of arranged, Harry said. Yes. There was a comfortable silence, which was new and felt slightly fragile, the way new things do. Will you tell me about the Horcruxes? Harry said. Dumbledore's expression shifted. You know about them, Harry said. You're investigating them. I've known for a while that what's keeping Voldemort alive is something more than just magic. In the graveyard he talked about coming back, about having prepared. Prepared means objects. The soul magic in the bond has given me, I can feel the shape of it, when I think about that night. There are fractures. In him. Dumbledore looked at him for a very long time. Yes, he said. There are Horcruxes. And then he told Harry about them, more directly, more immediately, with fewer layers of management than Harry suspected he'd originally planned to use, because the conversation had established a different standard and Dumbledore, whatever his faults, was genuinely responsive to evidence. It took another hour. When it was done, Harry sat with the weight of it. The scope of what was coming. Not just Crouch but Voldemort underneath Crouch, the real war under the immediate one, the Horcruxes out there in the world like landmines waiting. He didn't feel crushed by it. He felt, instead, the quality of a person who has been given complete information and can now actually plan. Thank you, he said, and meant it. Thank you, Dumbledore said. For the exchange. He left the same way he'd arrived, quietly, without drama, the wards barely noting his departure in the way that very skilled magic tends to leave the world undisturbed. Fleur found him still sitting on the wall 20 minutes later. She came across the practice ground with the specific quality of purpose that meant she'd watched some of it from the house, not all, not intruding, but aware. How was it? She said. Better than expected, he said. Harder than expected. He looked at her. He told me about the Horcruxes. She went still. You know what those are, he said. Cursebreaker training. Her voice was careful. Yes. I know what they are. She sat beside him on the wall, beside him, not at the right angle, next to him, which was its own kind of statement. How many? He thinks 6. Possibly 7 if Voldemort went as far as he suspects. Harry looked at the repaired wall section. Which means defeating Voldemort in a duel doesn't end it. He's put pieces of his soul into objects. All of them have to be destroyed first. Do you know where they are? 2 are already destroyed. Dumbledore has theories about the others. He paused. It's a long road. Yes, she said. And Crouch is in the middle of it. A real, active, resource threat who is not Voldemort and is not going to be handled by whatever Dumbledore's long-term Voldemort plan is. Yes, she said again. And the bond is still developing. My power is still, changing. Expanding. He turned the ring on his finger. The sight of structure was on at the edges of his perception constantly now, the ward layers of the property, the ambient magic of the chateau, the specific signature of Fleur beside him like a fire he could read. Are you overwhelmed? She asked. No, he said. And the thing was, it was true. She looked at him sideways. You are thinking about Aldrich. Sitting on a wall in France having decided something. He wasted 20 years, Harry said. I keep coming back to that. 20 years of being a tool, being used, being pointed at problems by people who valued the pointing. And then the bond happened and Sylvian said, you know what she said, in the portrait, that first day. La fire trouve cek le froid caché, Fleur said quietly. The fire finds what the cold was hiding. Yes. Harry looked at his hands, both of them, the ring on the right, the scar on the left wrist from the graveyard, the whole history written in the skin. I know what I am now. And I know what I'm doing. Both things. He paused. I'm going to destroy the Horcruxes. I'm going to handle Crouch. I'm going to deal with Voldemort when the time comes. And I'm going to do all of it on my own terms, with the people I trust, without spending 20 years being managed into someone else's shape first. The evening was beginning its arrival over the valley. The light going amber and then rose. The lavender starting its evening smell, which was different from the morning smell in a way Harry had learned to notice. Fleur was quiet for a moment. The people you trust, she said. You, he said. Directly, without the kind of performance that makes a true thing feel staged. Your family. Ron and Hermione. Dumbledore, partially, on a verified basis. Aldrich, from a portrait. He smiled. It's enough. She was quiet again. The jaw thing, but without the tension, the settled version of it. I have been thinking, she said, about what I want. And? The curse-breaking apprenticeship I turned down, she said. I turned it down because of how it was offered. Not because I don't want to do it. She looked at the valley. I want to be a curse-breaker. I want to do the field work, the old structures, the trapped objects, the history that is sealed in magic and needs to be carefully opened. She paused. There is a great deal of that in what is coming. The Horcruxes are curse-trapped objects. The Aldrich Vault had curse architecture throughout it. The manor in Godric's Hollow will have more. Another pause. I want to be part of this. Not because the bond says I should be. Because I am qualified and interested, and I will be furious if you try to do this without the best cursebreaker available. You're the best cursebreaker available, Harry said. Yes, she agreed. Without vanity. Just factually. Then obviously you're part of this, he said. She turned and looked at him. Something in her expression did the thing it had been doing for days now, that slow, final decision being made. The warmth in his chest was a very specific thing, present and aware. I want to be clear, she said. About what the bond is. And what it isn't. Tell me, he said. The bond found something real, she said. I believe that. I believe what your ancestor said and what my grandmother has known and what I felt when it activated. Something real recognized something real. She held his gaze. But I am not going to fall into this. I don't fall. I choose. And I am choosing, deliberately, with full information, she searched for the word and settled on the one that was most accurate, pursue this. You and I, as a genuine thing. Not because fate said so. Because I have been watching you for 3 weeks and you are exactly what the bond said you were, and I find that, the jaw thing, one final time, and then past it, compelling. More than compelling. Harry looked at her. I'm not going to fall either, he said. But for different reasons. I haven't had enough of the right things happen to me to fall into them. I approach them carefully. He paused. But I've been approaching this carefully for 3 weeks and the conclusion is the same as yours. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she reached out and put her hand over his, the ring hand, the right one, her fingers over his, and the warmth in his chest became briefly so specific and so present that it was almost sound. The bond sang. No other word. A single clear note that they both felt simultaneously, and Fleur's eyes went entirely gold for 3 seconds, and Harry felt the sight of structure light up in a way it never had before, showing him not ward architecture or curse seams but the bond itself in its full form, every strand, every layer, every part of it that was still growing and every part that was already complete, and it was extraordinary, the most intricate and purposeful structure he had ever seen. And then normal. Her eyes blew again. His vision returned to the lavender and the valley. Her hand still over his. 300 years, she said, quietly. Yeah, he said. They sat on the wall until full dark arrived and Paul called them in for dinner, and neither of them moved their hands. Later that night Harry was at the desk in his east-facing room writing a new letter to Hermione, longer, with the Horcrux information encoded carefully, with his thinking about Crouch and the timeline and what he needed, when a knock came at the door. Apollon. She looked at him in the way she'd looked at him since the first morning in the garden, warm and precise, and she had something in her hand, a small book, very old, leather-bound, with no title on the cover. Sylvian's journal, she said. The original. My mother has kept it for 40 years. She set it on the desk beside his letter. She thought you should have it. Not to read necessarily, though you may, but to keep. She paused. She said that Aldrich's heir should have Sylvian's words as well as his own. Harry looked at the book. He didn't open it, just rested his hand on the cover, and even through the leather he could feel the faint warmth of 3 centuries of preserved magic. The same warmth as the ring. The same warmth as the bond. All of it connected. Apollon, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Thank you, he said. For all of it. Bringing me here. Explaining things. Preparing me without shaping me into what you needed me to be. That could have gone differently. She was quiet for a moment. Something moved in her expression that was not her usual precision, something that a mother carries, specific and non-transferable. You saved my daughter from a lake, she said. You treated her like a person from the first moment. You read a 300-year-old letter and took from it exactly the right lesson. She paused. The rest was simply making sure you had what you needed. She left. The door closed softly. Harry looked at the letter he was writing. At Sylvian's journal. At the ring on his hand. At the dark window with the valley invisible beyond it, the valley that was already something he associated with something like home, which was not a word he'd ever had stable purchase on. He thought about tomorrow. About Crouch coming. About the Horcruxes in the dark somewhere, tethered to a soul that had done terrible things to make itself unfracturable and achieved only the opposite. About a long road with very specific company. He picked up his quill and kept writing. Chapter 6, The Chosen and the Choosing. Crouch came on a Sunday. Harry knew 3 days before it happened. Not through intelligence, not through any warning from Dumbledore's network or Hermione's research, though both had been active and useful. He knew through the ring. On Thursday morning he woke with the sight of structure showing him something new, a distant presence, directional, with the specific quality of someone who had been building toward a location for a long time and had finally committed to the approach. Not a signature he recognized by name. But the architecture of the magic was unmistakable, tight, old, with the particular compression of someone who had spent decades making their power invisible and had gotten so good at it that the invisibility itself had a texture. He told Fleur first. She was in the kitchen, coffee in hand, book open on the table, a Gringotts text on soulbound curse architecture that she'd requested from the Vault 7 library and had been reading every morning for a week. She looked up when he came in and saw his face and set the coffee down. When? She said. 3 days. Maybe 4. He sat across from her. He's approaching carefully. He's been watching the property, mapping the wards from a distance. He's thorough. He built the ministry's covert operations infrastructure from the ground up, Fleur said. Thorough is what he does. She was already thinking, he could feel it, the focused rapid quality. He will come with a team. Not proxies this time. His own people, the ones he's trusted longest. How many do you think? She considered. 4. Maybe 5. He will want enough to overwhelm the wards through concentrated force while he comes through the gap. He has seen that standard bypass doesn't work here, so he will try brute force disruption, enough simultaneous assault on the ward matrix to create a temporary opening. Can it work? Harry said. Against my mother's wards? She picked her coffee back up. Not quickly. But sustained assault over several minutes, yes, eventually. The wards are not infinite. No ward matrix is. She paused. We do not let it get to several minutes. No, Harry agreed. They told Apollon. She listened with the stillness she brought to serious information and then asked 2 questions, the direction of approach and whether Harry could track the distance, and then went to find Celeste. Harry spent Thursday and Friday preparing. He went through the property with the sight of structure fully engaged, reading every layer of Apollon's ward matrix until he knew it the way he knew his own wand, not just what it did but how it was built, where the load-bearing elements were and where the redundancies were and where, if he needed to, he could add to it. He spent 4 hours on Friday reinforcing 3 specific points that the ring identified as the thinnest sections, not with the same architecture as Apollon's work but with his own, a different layer that sat alongside hers rather than trying to replicate it. Fleur watched him do it, following with her Cursebreaker's reading of the work. That's Aldrich's architecture, she said. The same structural logic as the Vault's 7 preservation charms. I've been absorbing it, Harry said. From the ring, from the vault, from the manor. It's in the bloodline, I think. Once the sealing came off I started accessing it naturally. She was quiet for a moment. The layers don't conflict, she said, reading where his work met Apollon's. They're complementary. Different frequencies but compatible. I tried to make them compatible, he said. I could see where hers was and tried to fill the gaps rather than overlap. She looked at him with the expression that still, weeks in, caught him slightly off guard, the one that was past assessment and fully arrived somewhere else. When we practice together, she said, you always do that. Find the gap and fill it rather than trying to do everything yourself. Combat awareness, he said. You have to know what your partner is doing. Most people don't, she said. They cast what they know and hope it lines up. That gets people killed, he said. She looked at him steadily. Yes, she said. It does. Saturday they drilled. Not with Celeste directing, Celeste observed, from her chair which had been moved to the practice ground for the purpose, and said nothing for 4 hours, which was more unsettling than her usual direction. Harry and Fleur worked through the specific scenario, ward assault on multiple points, a gap opening, 1 or more people coming through. Cover, counter, response. They worked until the movements were automatic and the combined casting had the particular quality of something that has been practiced enough to become instinct, no gaps in the handoff, no pause between his defense and her fire, the bond carrying information between them fast enough that communication was almost unnecessary. By evening they were sitting against the repaired wall, both tired in a productive way, and Celeste finally spoke. Good, she said. Not bien. Good. In English. Harry and Fleur looked at each other. Did she just, Harry started. Do not make a thing of it, Fleur said, but the corner of her mouth had done its small, true thing, and he felt the warmth in his chest pulse with something that was partly the bond and partly just his own uncomplicated happiness, which was still a new enough feeling that he noticed it each time. Paul spent Saturday cooking, which was his preparation method and possibly the most useful one given what a Saturday dinner did for everyone's state of mind. Gabrielle spent it writing a story in English about a brave wizard and a fire lady who defeated a bad man, which she read to Harry after dinner with complete narrative confidence and which was, Harry thought, the most accurate account of the situation he was likely to receive. Is this us? He said, pointing to the 2 main characters. We, Gabrielle said. The fire lady breathes actual fire in chapter 3, he said. We, Gabrielle said again, with the patience of an author clarifying artistic choices. Fleur doesn't actually breathe fire. Gabrielle looked at him with 8-year-old certainty. Pas encore, she said. Not yet. Fleur, from across the room, did not look up from her book. She is not wrong, she said. Sunday morning arrived clear and warm, the kind of July day the south of France produced with the confidence of something that had been doing it for a long time. Harry was up before the sun, which was unusual, sitting on the window ledge of his east-facing room watching the valley go from dark to blue to gold. The ring was warm and the presence it was tracking was close, closer than yesterday by a significant margin, the commitment of approach fully resolved now. Tonight, maybe. This afternoon at the earliest. He wasn't afraid. He examined that as he sat in the window, turning it over the way Fleur turned problems over, honestly, without the management. He wasn't performing calm, wasn't suppressing fear. He genuinely wasn't afraid, and the reason was specific: he knew the ground. He knew the wards and the gaps and how to move through the property in the dark. He knew what Fleur would do at every point because they drilled it until it was bone memory. He knew his own power without the ceiling, which was, it was something. Something that Whitmore's face had confirmed and the binding curse's immediate dissolution had confirmed and Aldrich's letter had confirmed 300 years in advance. He was afraid of Voldemort. That was honest. The graveyard had done something to the part of him that thought about Voldemort, a particular quality of dread that wasn't cowardice but was correct threat assessment. Voldemort was the long road. Crouch was today. He went downstairs. Apollon was in the kitchen, which was not surprising. She had the specific quality of someone who had also not slept much, but was managing it with the same efficiency she brought to everything else. She had made coffee and was sitting at the table with a ward schematic, the additional layer he'd put in on Friday, spread in front of her. She looked up when he came in. "It's very good," she said, gesturing to the schematic. "You modified your eastern section," he said, sitting down. "Saturday morning, while I was in the orchard. You added a resonance layer." She raised an eyebrow. "The ring," he said. "I can feel the whole matrix now. Not just what I put in." She considered this for a moment. "I added a resonance layer," she confirmed. "If the matrix is hit hard enough on the eastern side, it will respond rather than absorb. Push back." She paused. "I've never been able to do that on my own, it requires too much simultaneous holding. But your layer gave me an anchor point." "The different frequencies," Harry said. "Compatible." "Yes." She looked at him steadily. "He is close." "I know. This afternoon, I think." She nodded. Then she said, "Harry. Before this happens. I want to tell you something." He waited. "The bond has developed very fast," she said. "Faster than the historical records suggest is typical. My mother says it is because of the compression of your early life. 20 years of suppression and isolation means there was a great deal waiting to be released. The bond opened the tap and everything has moved quickly." She paused. "What I want to tell you is that the speed of the development is not a problem. Some people would tell you it is too much, too fast. That you should be careful. That you are young. But," he said. "But the bond does not develop this way unless both people are genuinely ready for what it is," she said. "Not ready in the sense of planned and considered. Ready in the sense of, formed. Themselves, fully, without the remainder of becoming." She looked at him. "You are 15 years old and you are more formed than most 40-year-olds I have met. That is not normal. It is also not wrong. It is what you are." She paused. "My daughter is the same. She has always been the same. Fully arrived before the world expected her to be." She looked at the schematic. "I am telling you this because what happens today, and what comes after today, is going to be difficult. And I want you to know that I am not watching this with a mother's reservation. I am watching it with a mother's, she searched, trust. Harry held this. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me before we've had coffee, she said, and poured 2 cups, and that was that. Crouch came at 3 in the afternoon. Harry felt the assault on the wards before the first crack reached the house, the ring giving its alarm pulse, specific and directional, from the north and the east simultaneously, which confirmed the theory. 2-point assault, enough bodies on each point to concentrate force, designed to stretch the matrix until something gave. He was already moving. Fleur came out of the study at the same moment he crossed the entrance hall. She'd felt it too, through the bond, and she was dressed for it, wand out, the specific quality of alert that was her version of ready written in every line of her. The fire was already in her left hand, controlled and waiting. North and east, he said. I count 4 on north, 3 on east, she said. 7 total. He brought more than we expected. Yes. Not alarm. Adjustment. He is serious. Take the east, Harry said. I'll take north and find Crouch. She nodded once. No discussion, no hesitation. They'd drilled this, not this exact scenario but the logic of it, and the bond carried the rest of the coordination without words. She went east. He went north. The north side of the property had the oldest section of wall, the original boundary, and the ward matrix here was the deepest, Apollin's work on decades-old foundations, his additions on top of it. He could feel the assault happening in real time, 4 points of force hammering at the matrix in rhythm, which was the technique, not random, rhythmic, like breaking down a door by matching the structure's natural frequency. He reached the wall and looked through it with the sight of structure. 4 people, as Fleur had counted. 3 in ministry field grey, 1 in civilian clothes. The one in civilian clothes was directing. Harry could see it in the way the assault rhythm changed when that figure made small gestures. Coordinating the frequency. Someone who understood the technique precisely. Not Crouch. A lieutenant. He scanned wider. There. 15 meters to the left of the assault team, moving along the wall toward the small gate in the northwest corner. A single figure, alone, with the most compressed magical signature Harry had encountered outside of Dumbledore, tight enough to be nearly invisible, but not quite, because the ring showed him the shape of what was being hidden. There was Crouch. He didn't wait for the assault to breach. He went over the wall. Not dramatically, he simply stepped up onto it and off the other side, the ward matrix parting for him in the specific way it responded to the Potter Delacour edition, the layer that knew his signature. He landed in the long grass outside the property boundary and the assault team registered the movement and 2 of them turned. He put them down with 2 nonverbal spells that were not gentle and not harmful, a combined disorientation and bind that he'd worked out on his own over the last week, taking the architecture of the binding curse from the containment vessel, inverting it, making it defensive. They went down cleanly, wands away from their hands. The lieutenant turned and started casting. Harry felt the shape of the incoming spell, attack this time, not binding, and stepped sideways out of its path and cast once more, and the lieutenant went down. 4th figure was already running. Harry let him go. He turned toward the northwest corner and walked. Not ran. Walked, because running toward Bartemius Crouch Sr. was not the message he wanted to send. Crouch was at the gate. He had one hand on the lock and his wand in the other and he was performing a ward dissolution, not the standard ministry technique, something older and more precise, but it was slow work and the gate hadn't opened. He heard Harry coming and turned. Harry took him in quickly, fully. Taller than Harry remembered from the World Cup, or perhaps the compression of his public persona had made him seem smaller then. He was in his 60s, lean, with the specific quality of someone who had been physically rigorous their whole life. His hair was white-gray and precise. His face was the face of a man who had spent 30 years being right and the 10 years after that being unable to accept that rightness alone was not sufficient. His eyes were extraordinary. Not in a good way. In the way of a fire that had burned everything available and was now burning itself, intense, present, and with the particular quality of someone who no longer feared the cost of anything. He looked at Harry with no surprise whatsoever. "Potter," he said. His voice was exactly what Harry expected, measured, authoritative, the voice of a man who had run interrogations and tribunals and had never once doubted his mandate. "Crouch," Harry said. He stopped 8 feet away. The late afternoon light was long and gold across the grass. "You removed my people," Crouch said. "Bound and disoriented. They'll be fine in an hour." Harry looked at him steadily. 3 visits, Bartemius. If you wanted to talk you could have old. Something moved in Crouch's face. Not offense. Something more complicated, the response of a man who has been called by his first name by someone he didn't authorize to use it, and who cannot decide whether to be angry or to adjust. He adjusted. Harry noted this. It meant Crouch was genuinely pragmatic under the rigidity, which made him more dangerous than someone who simply reacted. "I did not come to talk," Crouch said. "I know," Harry said. "You came to attach a binding curse and take me back to England and put me somewhere useful." He paused. "The conversation is what happens instead." Crouch looked at him with those burning eyes. "You are 15 years old," he said, and it was not condescension, it was something stranger, almost grief, the specific grief of a man who has watched the world put weight on children before and watched what it does. "You have no idea what is coming." "I know about the Horcruxes," Harry said. Silence. "I know Voldemort is back and that he has fractured his soul into objects and that until those objects are destroyed he cannot be permanently killed. I know there are likely 6 of them, possibly 7. I know that Dumbledore is investigating and has identified 2 as already destroyed." Harry held Crouch's gaze. "I know more than you expected me to know. And I know it because people have started treating me like a person who can hold information rather than a weapon that needs to be loaded and aimed." Crouch was very still. "Who told you this?" he said quietly. "Dumbledore," Harry said. "In a conversation. 2 people exchanging information. Novel approach, it turns out to work." He paused. "You should try it. Dumbledore is," Crouch stopped. Started again. "He plays a long game, Potter. A very long game. He has been playing it since before you were born and the pieces he moves are not pieces he is sentimental about." "I know that too," Harry said. "And yet you trust him." "Partially. On a verified basis." Harry tilted his head slightly. "The same way I'd trust anyone who has relevant information and has demonstrated they can be honest when I make the conditions honest." Crouch looked at him. Something in the burning eyes shifted, the quality of assessment, of recalibration. "You are not what I was told you were," he said. "I know," Harry said. "What were you told?" "That you were volatile. Grief-struck. That the tournament had destabilized you. That you needed guidance and containment or you would become a liability." Crouch's voice was flat, delivering this without apology. "I was told this by a source inside Hogwarts whose information has been reliable for years." "Which means the source knew me well enough to give a convincing account," Harry said. "Or didn't know me well and was guessing." "Who was it?" Crouch was quiet. "You don't have to tell me," Harry said. "I have a reasonable guess." He thought about the year. About who had access to information about his emotional state, his performance, his vulnerabilities. About who had reason to present him as unstable. "The point is that whoever told you had an interest in your conclusion. Which means you've been running an operation based on compromised intelligence." He let that land. "You of all people know what that costs." The stillness in Crouch's face became something different. There it was. The thing under the burning certainty. Harry had felt it coming for the whole conversation, the shape of the man underneath the 30 years of justification. A father who had sent his son to prison. A prosecutor who had crossed lines he'd drawn himself. A man who had spent a decade in a grief-stricken, guilt-ridden diminishment and had climbed back out of it by finding a purpose that felt like righteousness. And now the purpose had been built on bad information. "I have spent 30 years, Crouch said, and his voice was different, not the tribunal voice, something rawer, fighting a war that the world decided was over when it wasn't. Watching the Ministry bury the truth because the truth was inconvenient. Watching Voldemort's people walk free because proof was inconvenient." He looked at Harry. "You know what it is to be the person who knows what's real and be told to stop." "Yes," Harry said. "Then you know why I cannot simply," he stopped. The burning eyes with something struggling behind them. "You are a weapon, Potter. Not because I wish you to be one. Because that is what you are. What you have been made into. The prophecy, the scar, the circumstances of your survival. There are things coming that will require a weapon." "I know," Harry said. "And weapons that act independently aren't weapons," Harry said. "They're people." He took one step forward. "Not threatening. Closing distance to the kind that required honesty. That's the thing you're missing. The thing the binding curse was for. You want to point me at Voldemort and pull the trigger at the right moment. But a person who understands what they're doing and chooses to do it is worth 20 weapons that have been aimed." He paused. "I am going to destroy the Horcruxes. I am going to face Voldemort when the time comes. I am going to do those things because I understand what happens if I don't, and because people I care about are alive in the world he wants to burn, and because Cedric Diggory died and I am not going to let that be for nothing." He looked at Crouch steadily. "Not because you bound me and aimed me. Because I chose." Crouch stood at the gate for a long moment. The afternoon was very quiet. Somewhere behind the house Fleur had handled the eastern assault. Harry could feel through the bond that she was fine. The focused quality of her presence settled into the aftermath calm of something completed. The 3 people she'd been dealing with were down. The property was secure. Crouch looked old. Not in a way he hadn't been before, the age had always been visible. But now it looked like what it was, the age of someone who had been carrying things for a long time and whose body was announcing the cumulative weight. "The binding curse," he said. "You dissolved it from the inside." "Yes. You saw the architecture." "Completely." Harry raised his right hand, showing the ring. "The site of structure. Aldrich Potter's gift, activated by the bond." Crouch looked at the ring. And then something happened to his face that Harry had not expected, something that was neither the rigidity of a man with a mission nor the burning of one who had too much to justify. Something that was, simply, recognition. "Aldrich Potter," Crouch said quietly. "I know that name. From the historical records. He worked for the Ministry. Before he left. For 20 years he worked for the Ministry," Harry said. "Until he understood the difference between serving a cause and being used by an institution. Then he left. And you intend to do the same." "I intend to never start," Harry said. "I intend to operate as myself, with the people I trust, toward the objectives I've chosen. If the Ministry's interests align with mine, I'll work with the Ministry. If they don't, I won't." He paused. "If you want to be useful, Crouch, actually useful, tell me everything you know about Voldemort's network that Dumbledore doesn't. The Death Eaters who walked free, the assets, the contingencies. You built a career prosecuting them. You know where the bodies are buried, literally." Harry held his gaze. "That's worth something. That's worth a great deal, actually. But I need it as information given, not leverage held." Crouch was quiet for a very long time. The afternoon light had gone past gold and was heading toward the rose of early evening. The lavender was doing its dusk smell. The valley below the property was settling into the longer shadows. Crouch lowered his wand. It was such a small movement. And it was everything. "I will not work for you," he said. "I know," Harry said. "I will not be managed. Or debriefed. Or, handled. I'm not interested in any of those things, Harry said. I'm interested in exchange. What you know for what I can offer. Which is? When this is over, Harry said, when Voldemort is genuinely finished and the Horcruxes are destroyed, the people who were using his return to manipulate the Ministry, who have been suppressing the truth and protecting his allies, those people need to face someone. Someone with the knowledge and the legal groundwork and the will to prosecute them properly. He looked at Crouch steadily. You have done it before. I imagine you would like to do it again. Correctly, this time. The burning in Crouch's eyes had changed. It was the same intensity, that would never leave, Harry suspected. It was structural to the man, but the quality of it was different. No longer a fire burning itself. Something with fuel again. That is either very naive, Crouch said slowly, or very calculated. Both, Harry said. I learned from the best. A long silence. An owl, somewhere in the estate trees, made its evening announcement. The valley did what the valley did. My intelligence on Voldemort's network is extensive, Crouch said finally. I have files. 30 years of files, none of them in Ministry custody. I'd like to see them, Harry said. With Apollon Delacour present. She will serve as a neutral party and a legal witness. Crouch looked at him. The Delacour woman. She is thorough, Harry said. Something moved in Crouch's face that was, improbably, the ghost of something almost like humor. I've heard that about her, he said. Where are the files? Harry said. Safe, Crouch said. I need time. To review what can be shared and what requires context. And he stopped. There are things in those files that implicate people who are currently in positions of authority. If that information goes wrong, I understand, Harry said. Take the time you need. But not unlimited time. A week. 2 weeks. 10 days, Harry said. Crouch looked at him with the eyes of a man being negotiated with by someone considerably younger than him and having the experience of losing ground. 10 days, he said. He left without drama, which was somehow the most surprising thing about it. No portkey, he walked down the lane, through a gap in the hedge, and was simply gone. Harry stood by the gate and watched him go and then turned back toward the house. Fleur was crossing the garden toward him. She'd come around from the eastern side, and she was entirely unharmed, with the specific quality of someone who has been in a fight and found it satisfactorily conclusive. There was a scorch mark on her left sleeve that was new and a strand of hair out of place, and those were the only evidence of whatever had happened on the east wall. 3, she said. Down and bound. They'll be fine in an hour, yeah, Harry said. He'd used the same estimate. She stopped in front of him. Looked at his face. Did the full reading. He left, she said. He left. Not arrested. Not expelled. Left. We have a 10-day arrangement, Harry said. He has files on Voldemort's network that Dumbledore may not have. 30 years of independent intelligence gathering. She stared at him. He tried to bind you and take you to England, she said. I know. Twice. I know. And you gave him 10 days and a potential future arrangement. He has information we need, Harry said. And he has a skill set that becomes valuable when the war ends and someone has to hold Voldemort's people accountable. Putting him in a cell doesn't use him. Pointing him at the right problem does. Fleur looked at him for a long moment. You just did to him, she said slowly, what he tried to do to you. Pointed him at a problem. With his full knowledge and agreement, Harry said. That's the difference. She was quiet. The assessment happening at full speed. And then something settled in her expression, the final arrival of a thing that had been deciding for weeks. Aldrich's letter, she said. Yeah. Do not apologize for what you are, she quoted. That one specifically, Harry said. But also the 20 years part. I'm not going to waste 20 years being managed. I'm going to use what I have now, for the things that matter now, with the people who chose to be here. He looked at her. Starting with you. She held his gaze. The Horcruxes, she said. We need to discuss a plan. Dumbledore's information plus Crouch's files, when we get them, plus whatever Hermione has found, that is enough to start a real map. Tomorrow, Harry said. Tonight I want dinner and Gabrielle narrating the whole thing in English and your father telling me the name of something in the garden and your grandmother sitting in the corner being quietly correct about everything. Fleur's expression did the thing where it had stopped trying to be anything except what it was. My grandmother is always correct about everything, she said. I know, he said. It's one of her best qualities. They walked back toward the house together. The evening was full dark coming, the valley below them lit by the first stars that were decided enough to show up before the others. The lavender had gone to its nighttime smell, different again, deeper, the version of itself it saved for dark. The chateau was lit from inside, warm windows in old stone. Paul appeared in the kitchen window, saw them coming, and disappeared back into the cooking. Gabrielle appeared in the same window immediately after, saw them, said something that was probably English and probably commentary, and also disappeared. She's going to want the full story, Harry said. She will have written her own version by the time we get inside, Fleur said. She is very fast. Will her version be accurate? Her version will be better than accurate, Fleur said. It will be right. They reached the kitchen door. Fleur put her hand on the doorframe, and Harry put his on the same frame above hers, not touching, just both of them pausing at the threshold of the warm, lit room with the dinner sounds and the familiar voices and the valley behind them going into its beautiful dark. The bond was steady between them, the silver-gold structure fully visible to him, still growing but no longer in the urgent accelerated way of the first weeks, growing now in the way of something that has found its direction and is following it with confidence. Not rushed. Not anxious. Just continuing, the way real things continue. Tomorrow we plan, he said. Tomorrow we plan, she agreed. Tonight is tonight, she said, and opened the door. Inside, Gabrielle was already at the table with her story. Paul was at the stove. Apollon was reading Sylvian's journal, which she had borrowed from Harry's room without asking, which was fine. Celeste was in her chair in the corner with her winter sky eyes and her 40 years of waiting finally answered, watching Harry come through the door with the expression of a person who bet everything on something long ago and has just watched it pay. Harry sat down. The warmth in his chest was a steady, real fire. He thought about Aldrich Potter in a kitchen in the Dordogne with Sylvian's laugh in the walls and 40 years ahead of him. He thought about a letter written for someone who wouldn't arrive for 3 centuries, patient and direct and full of the specific wisdom of someone who had wasted time and refused to keep wasting it. The fire finds what the cold was hiding. He looked at Fleur, who was reading Gabrielle's story over her shoulder with the expression of someone who wants to be critical and is finding it difficult because the story is actually good. He looked at Celeste, who gave him the single small nod of someone confirming something they always knew. He looked at the ring on his hand, and at the valley through the window, and at the long road ahead, the Horcruxes, Voldemort, the war that wasn't over, all the hard and necessary things waiting in the future with their own weight and their own demands. And he looked back at the table. At the people around it. At the fire. He wasn't afraid.